The advertisement was printed crooked, like whoever set the type didn't care enough to do it right. Cook wanted. Isolated cattle ranch near Red Mesa territory. Room and board included. Must tolerate difficult conditions. Apply at the Mercer Ranch. Ivy Calloway stared at those words until the ink seemed to blur. Her fingers, rough from years of scrubbing pots and kneading dough, traced the paper's edge. Around her, the boarding house dining room echoed with emptiness. Chairs sat stacked on tables. Dust caught the weak February light streaming through windows that hadn't been cleaned in months. Her father's gambling debts had taken everything except this building, and even that would belong to the bank by week's end. "You really going out there?" Ivy turned. Martha Hendricks stood in the doorway, arms crossed over her apron. Martha ran the dress shop 2 buildings down and had known Ivy since childhood, which meant she'd witnessed every humiliation, every whispered insult, every man who looked past Ivy like she was furniture. "Don't have much choice, do I?" Ivy folded the advertisement carefully, tucking it into her apron pocket. Martha's face softened, but pity was worse than contempt. Always had been. "Ivy, honey, you know what people say about that ranch, about Cole Mercer." "I know what people say about everything, Martha." Ivy's voice came out harder than she intended. "Been hearing it my whole life." The silence stretched between them like taffy. Finally, Martha sighed. "They say his wife died under strange circumstances, that he's got a temper mean enough to scare rattlesnakes. That ranch hands quit after 1 season because he works them half to death." Ivy picked up a chair, set it down with more force than necessary. "They also say I'm too fat to deserve love, that no man would want me unless he was desperate or drunk, that I should be grateful anyone hires me at all." She met Martha's eyes. "So forgive me if I don't put much stock in what people say." Martha opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "It's 3 days' ride in winter, alone, through country where cattle thieves would kill you for your wagon supplies. Then I better pack extra ammunition." "Ivy, Martha." Ivy's hand stilled on the chair back. "I appreciate the concern. I do. But my daddy gambled away every cent we had, drank himself into an early grave, and left me with nothing but cooking equipment and enough shame to last a lifetime. This job is the only answer to a prayer I stopped believing would get answered." She didn't mention that she'd stopped praying altogether after her mother died, that she'd stopped believing in much of anything except the reality that the world measured women by their waistlines and found her wanting. 3 days later, Ivy's wagon rolled out of Blackstone Ridge before dawn. The good citizens who'd known her all 28 years didn't bother with goodbyes. A few shopkeepers nodded from their doorways. The banker who'd foreclosed on the boarding house actually smiled, probably relieved to be rid of the reminder of her father's failures. Only Martha showed up at the edge of town, pressing a bundle into Ivy's hands. "Extra blankets, and my daddy's old Colt revolver. It's loaded." Ivy's throat tightened. "Martha, don't you dare get killed out there, Ivy Calloway. I expect to hear you've got that ranch running smooth as butter within a month." It was the kindest lie anyone had told her in years. The journey west tested everything Ivy thought she knew about cold. The first night, temperatures dropped so low the water in her canteen froze solid. She huddled under Martha's blankets, her breath coming out in white clouds, and wondered if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. The second day brought wind that cut through her wool coat like it was made of paper. Snow began falling around noon, not the pretty gentle kind from picture books, but hard pellets that stung exposed skin. Ivy pulled her scarf tighter and kept the horses moving. She'd purchased the team and wagon with the last money her father hadn't gambled away. 2 sturdy draft horses named Sam and Delilah, both past their prime but reliable. The wagon carried everything she owned: cooking pots, her mother's cast iron skillet, 3 changes of clothes, a trunk of recipe books, and enough supplies to last 2 weeks if she stretched them. That second night, she made camp in a hollow between 2 hills that blocked some of the wind. She built a fire, heated beans and coffee, and sat listening to coyotes howl in the distance. This was foolish. This was dangerous. This was the only option she had left. On the 3rd day, the landscape changed. The rolling plains gave way to rougher country, rocky outcrops, sparse trees bent sideways by wind, stretches of land that looked like the earth had cracked open and forgotten to heal. Red Mesa territory. Beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. Late afternoon, Ivy spotted the ranch. It sat in a shallow valley, protected on three sides by rock formations that glowed rust-colored in the fading light. From a distance, it looked almost picturesque. Ranch house, barn, corrals, outbuildings scattered across snow-covered ground. Up close, the truth revealed itself. The barn roof sagged dangerously on one side, weighted down by snow and neglect. Fences had collapsed in multiple places, posts rotting or missing entirely. The corrals held maybe a dozen cattle when there should have been hundreds. The ranch house itself looked tired, paint peeling, one shutter hanging crooked. This wasn't just a difficult job. This was a dying ranch held together by stubbornness and desperation. Ivy guided the wagon toward the house, her heart hammering. Sam and Delilah's hooves crunched through ice-crusted snow. Smoke rose from the chimney, at least, which meant someone was home. The front door opened before she could climb down. A man stepped onto the porch. Cole Mercer was exactly what everyone said and nothing like what Ivy expected. Tall, well over 6 feet, with shoulders broad enough to block the doorway. He wore work clothes that had seen better decades. Faded shirt, worn vest, trousers tucked into scuffed boots. Dark hair fell past his collar, streaked with early gray at the temples. A few days' worth of beard shadowed his jaw. But it was his eyes that made Ivy's breath catch. Not because they were cold, though they were. Not because they were cruel, though she'd expected them to be. But because they were exhausted in a way that went bone deep. This was a man who'd stopped sleeping properly months, maybe years ago, who carried weight that had nothing to do with muscle. His gaze landed on Ivy, swept over her body in one quick assessment, then looked away. Not with disgust, not with the barely concealed mockery she'd grown accustomed to. Just nothing. Like he'd already cataloged what he needed to know and moved on. "You're the cook?" His voice matched his appearance. Rough, worn, like gravel sliding down a hillside. Ivy climbed down from the wagon, her legs stiff from 3 days of travel. She'd dressed in her best outfit for this meeting, a navy dress that fit too tight across her middle no matter how she altered it, a clean apron, her mother's cameo brooch pinned at her collar. She still looked like exactly what she was, a heavy-set woman with flour permanently embedded under her fingernails and hope she wasn't foolish enough to voice out loud. "Yes, sir. Ivy Calloway. I'm here about the position." Cole looked past her toward the dying ranch spread out behind him. The wind picked up, rattling the loose shutter. Somewhere in the distance, a cow lowed mournfully. "Then you're either brave or desperate." The words could have been an insult. Instead, they sounded like simple observation from someone who recognized the territory because he lived there too. Ivy lifted her chin. "Probably both." For the first time, something flickered across Cole Mercer's face. Not quite a smile, but close enough that Ivy saw the man he might have been before whatever happened to hollow him out. "Fair enough." He stepped aside, gesturing toward the door. "Come inside before you freeze. We'll discuss terms." The interior of the ranch house matched the exterior. Once loved, now neglected. The main room served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting space all at once. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, fire crackling behind an iron grate. Rough-hewn furniture sat arranged without much thought to comfort. A scarred dining table, mismatched chairs, a settee that sagged on one side. But underneath the dust and disrepair, Ivy saw evidence of care. Hand-carved details on the mantelpiece. Curtains someone had sewn with tiny, perfect stitches. A bookshelf holding volumes arranged by height. Dried flowers in a vase on the windowsill, their colors faded but placement deliberate. A woman had lived here once. A woman who'd tried to make this harsh place into a home. "Kitchen's through there," Cole gestured toward an archway. "Bedrooms upstairs. Bunkhouse out back for ranch hands, but there's only 2 working here now. Me and old Joe Henderson." Ivy set down the bag she'd carried from the wagon. "What happened to the rest?" "Left." Cole's jaw tightened. "Pay got irregular when cattle prices dropped. Most men don't work for promises." "But Joe stayed?" "Joe's got nowhere else to go, same as me." The honesty was startling. Most men would have covered failure with excuses or bluster. Cole Mercer just stated facts like a man reading from a ledger that didn't balance. "The job's simple enough," he continued. 3 meals a day. Keep the house clean. Watch Maisie when I'm out working." Ivy's head snapped up. "Maisie?" "My daughter." The advertisement didn't mention a child. Does that change things? His eyes sharpened, defensive now, like he expected her to turn around and leave. No. Ivy thought about the dried flowers, the careful curtains. Just wish I'd known to bring something for her. Cole's expression shifted, surprise replacing suspicion. She's 6, quiet, doesn't trust easy. Can't imagine why, living out here. Ivy kept her voice gentle. I'd like to meet her. She's... Cole hesitated, then called toward the stairs. Maisie, come down here. Nothing. Cole's shoulders tensed. Maisie Grace Mercer, I said come down. Still nothing. He muttered something under his breath that might have been a curse, then started toward the stairs. Before he reached them, Ivy spoke. Mr. Mercer, if I may, might be she's scared. New person showing up, her daddy sounding angry. Cole stopped mid-stride, looked at her. For several seconds, something worked across his face. Frustration, shame, exhaustion. I'm not angry at her. I know, but she might not. He stepped back slowly, like surrendering territory. Ivy moved toward the stairs, stopping at the bottom. Maisie, my name's Ivy. I came a long way to meet you, but I understand if you're not ready yet. Tell you what, I'm going to make some coffee for your daddy and me. If you want to come down and try some of my special hot chocolate, I brought cocoa powder all the way from Wichita. Best in 3 counties. Silence. Then, so quiet, Ivy almost missed it. You got marshmallows? No marshmallows, I'm afraid. But I've got honey and cinnamon. Makes it taste like Christmas morning. More silence. Ivy waited. Behind her, she felt Cole's presence, tense and watchful. Finally, small footsteps creaked on the stairs. The little girl who appeared was all enormous eyes and tangled dark hair. She wore a dress that had been mended multiple times, the hem already too short for her growing legs. Her feet were bare despite the cold. She looked like a wild thing, cautious and ready to bolt. She also looked exactly like Cole Mercer, same dark hair, same sharp features, same way of watching like she was calculating 17 different escape routes. Maisie, Ivy smiled. Pleasure to meet you properly. The child didn't smile back, just studied Ivy with unsettling intensity. Then she said something that made Ivy's heart stop. You're fat. Maisie! Cole's voice went sharp with horror. Apologize right now. It's all right. Ivy kept her tone steady, even though the words stung like they always did. She looked directly at Maisie. You're right. I am. Some folks are tall, some are short, some are fat, some are thin. That's just how bodies work. Maisie's head tilted. Don't it make you sad? Sometimes, but not as sad as being mean about it would make me. The little girl considered this with the seriousness of someone much older. Daddy says only stupid people judge folks by how they look instead of what they do. Ivy's eyes flicked to Cole, who'd gone very still. His ears had turned slightly red. Your daddy sounds like a smart man. Maisie climbed down the remaining stairs, stopping a few feet away. You really got cocoa powder? I really do. Want to help me make it? For the first time, something like interest sparked in those watchful eyes. I get to help? Of course. Best hot chocolate requires 2 cooks. It's the law. That ain't a real law. But Maisie was already moving toward the kitchen archway. Is in my kitchen. Cole exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding his breath. When Ivy glanced at him, he mouthed 2 words. Thank you. She nodded and followed Maisie into the kitchen. The kitchen was bigger than Ivy expected and in worse shape than she'd feared. Dishes were piled in a wash basin, crusty with old food. The stove needed blacking. Flour dusted every surface, like someone had started baking 3 weeks ago and given up halfway through. Mouse droppings scattered across the counter proved the infestation was recent and thriving. But the bones were good. A massive cast-iron stove dominated one wall, the kind that could feed a crew of ranch hands with room to spare. Plenty of counter space, a dry sink with a hand pump that probably connected to a well. Shelves that could hold supplies for months if properly organized. This kitchen wanted to be loved again. Ivy rolled up her sleeves. First things first, we need clean pots. You know where your daddy keeps the scrub brushes? Maisie pointed towards a cabinet, then watched as Ivy began hauling out pots, assessing each one. What are you doing? Checking for rust, cracks, anything that'll ruin good food. Ivy held up a small saucepan. This one's perfect. Want to pump some water while I find the cocoa powder? Working together in easy silence, they got water heating on the stove. Ivy located the cocoa powder in her supplies along with honey and cinnamon. Maisie watched every movement with the intensity of a hawk tracking a mouse. "Why'd you come here?" the little girl asked suddenly. Ivy measured cocoa powder carefully. "Your daddy needed a cook. We had other cooks come. They all left." "Why'd they leave?" Maisie's face shuddered. "Said it was too hard, too far from town, too—" She trailed off. "Too what, honey?" "Too lonely." The words hung in the warm kitchen air. Ivy stopped measuring, looked at this 6-year-old child who already understood isolation better than most adults. "Well," Ivy said carefully, "I know a bit about lonely. Sometimes the loneliest places are right in the middle of crowds." Maisie studied her. "Were you lonely in Wichita?" "Every single day." "Why?" "Because people only saw my body and decided I wasn't worth knowing. Because my daddy drank away our future and my mama died before teaching me how to survive him. Because I spent 28 years being invisible unless someone needed pie baked or floors scrubbed. Because I didn't have friends who understood me," Ivy said instead. "Because my family was gone, because I needed somewhere I could be useful." "You useful here?" "I hope so." Maisie considered this while Ivy stirred cocoa into the heating water, adding honey and cinnamon until the smell filled the kitchen with sweetness. "I picked you," Maisie said quietly. Ivy paused mid-stir. "What?" The little girl's voice dropped to a whisper. "Papa's been trying to hire a cook for 2 months. Lots of ladies came. I listened when they talked to him." "You were supposed to be listening?" "No." Maisie grinned, showing a gap where a tooth should have been. "But I did anyway." Despite everything, Ivy smiled. "What'd you hear?" "One lady said Mama's garden was ugly and stupid. One said the house was too small for her talents. One laughed when she saw my room." Maisie's expression hardened. "Papa didn't hear that part, but I did." Ivy's chest tightened. "That must have hurt." "I told Papa she wouldn't work out. He thought I was being difficult." Maisie watched the cocoa bubble. "But I was protecting us. From people who'd be mean, from people who'd leave, like everyone else." The words came out matter-of-fact, but they carried weight no 6-year-old should have to bear. Ivy poured hot chocolate into 2 cups, adding extra honey to 1. She handed the sweeter version to Maisie. "Try that. Tell me if it needs more cinnamon." Maisie sipped carefully, eyes widening. "It's good." "Yeah?" "It tastes like—" Maisie searched for words. "Like warm." "That's the best kind of taste there is." They stood in the kitchen drinking cocoa while the fire crackled in the main room and wind howled outside. For the first time in days, Ivy felt herself relax slightly. Then Maisie said something that changed everything. "I didn't want to cook." Ivy set down her cup. "No?" Maisie looked at her with eyes too old for her face. "I wanted a mama." The kitchen went very quiet. Ivy's throat closed up. "Maisie, honey, the others wouldn't be good mamas. They were mean or fancy or didn't care." Maisie stepped closer. "But you smiled when you saw Mama's flowers on the windowsill, even though they're dead from winter." Ivy hadn't even realized she'd done that. "And you didn't get mad when I said you were fat, and you let me help make cocoa." Maisie's voice shook slightly. "And you look at Papa like he's sad instead of scary. Your Papa's not scary." "Everybody else thinks so." "Everybody else doesn't know him." "Do you?" "No," Ivy admitted, "but I'd like to try." Maisie stared at her for a long moment. Then, with the kind of directness only children possess, she asked, "You gonna leave too?" Ivy knelt down so they were eye level. "Maisie, I can't promise what I don't know, but I can promise I'll try my very best not to, all right? It wasn't enough. It couldn't be enough." But Maisie nodded anyway, like she'd expected nothing more from a world that kept taking things away. "Want to bring your Papa some coffee?" Ivy asked. "He takes it black. No sugar." "Bitter, huh?" "Like everything else here." But Maisie said it without malice, just observation. They carried cups to the main room where Cole had been building up the fire. He straightened when they entered, wariness creeping across his features. "We made you coffee," Maisie announced. "Miss Ivy did it right." "It's just Ivy. No miss needed." Ivy handed him the cup. Cole took it, fingers brushing hers briefly. His hands were scarred, calloused, trembling slightly from either cold or exhaustion. He sipped the coffee, eyebrows rising in surprise. "This is good." "Don't sound so shocked. It's only coffee." But Ivy felt a small glow of satisfaction anyway. "Better than what I've been drinking." Cole took another sip, something like relief crossing his face. "When can you start?" "Already started, seems like. Made cocoa, assessed the kitchen, met your daughter." Ivy glanced around. "Need to bring my supplies in from the wagon before they freeze, get a proper inventory of what you've got stored, figure out what needs ordering from town." "Town's 3 hours in good weather," Cole interrupted. "We go once a month at most." "Then I better make sure that list is complete." Cole studied her over the rim of his cup. "You sure about this? It's hard work, long hours, mostly just me and Maisie for company." "Mr. Mercer, I spent 10 years cooking at a boarding house where men complained if their eggs weren't perfect and women gossiped about my weight while eating my pie. This feels peaceful in comparison." Something flickered across his face. Might have been respect, might have been understanding. "Fair point. The room upstairs is yours, end of the hall. If you need anything, I'll figure it out, always have." They looked at each other for a beat too long. Then Cole cleared his throat. "Right. Well, I'll help unload your wagon before dark." He set down his cup, grabbed his coat from a hook by the door. "You don't have to." "You cooked. I'll haul. That's fair trade." He walked out before Ivy could argue. Maisie appeared at Ivy's elbow, watching her father's retreating back. "He likes you," the little girl said with certainty. "We just met." "Don't matter, I can tell." Maisie grinned up at her. "This is going to work." The confidence was startling and heartbreaking all at once. This child was so desperate for family that she was already building castles in the air. Ivy just hoped she wouldn't be the one to knock them down. That first night, Ivy learned exactly how broken this family was. She'd made a simple supper: beans, bacon, cornbread from supplies she'd brought. Nothing fancy, but hot and filling. They ate at the dining table in near silence. Cole shoveled food like he was fueling a machine, barely tasting anything. Maisie ate slowly, watching both adults with hawk-like attention. Ivy tried to make conversation and failed. After supper, Cole immediately headed for the door. "Livestock needs checking. Maisie, bed by 8. But, 8. No arguments." He grabbed his coat and rifle, then was gone into the darkness. Maisie's face crumpled slightly before going blank again. "Does your papa always work this late?" Ivy asked gently while clearing dishes. "Every night. Says coyotes come after dark." "Does he tuck you in?" Maisie shook her head. "Used to, before Mama died." There it was again, the ghost of the woman who'd hung curtains and arranged flowers. The absence that poisoned this house like slow-acting arsenic. "When did your mama pass?" Ivy asked. 2 years ago, winter. She got sick and—" Maisie's voice trailed off. "Papa doesn't talk about it. Gets mad if I ask questions." "Not mad. Sad, probably. Seems the same from where I'm standing." The observation was too knowing, too adult. Ivy finished the dishes, then held out her hand. "Come on, let's get you ready for bed." Maisie's room was upstairs, small and cold. A narrow bed with quilts piled high. A battered dresser, a shelf holding a few corn-husk dolls and one china-faced doll with a cracked head. "Mama made these." Maisie touched the corn-husk dolls carefully. "Papa fixed this one." She held up the china doll. "Her head broke when I dropped her. Papa glued it back together." The repair job was clumsy but thorough. Ivy could picture Cole hunched over the delicate doll, his large hands working with infinite patience to piece together something his daughter loved. "He did a good job," Ivy said. "He tries, just doesn't know how to fix people." Maisie changed into a nightgown, climbed under the quilts. Ivy tucked her in, pulling the blankets up to her chin. "You warm enough?" "Yeah, Ivy?" "Yes, honey?" "You really staying?" There was that question again, the fear underneath it. "I'm really going to try." Maisie grabbed her hand suddenly, squeezing tight with surprising strength. "Please don't go, please. I'll be good, I promise. I won't say mean things about you being fat or make messes or—" Hey. Ivy sat on the edge of the bed. "You being good or bad doesn't change whether I stay. That's not how it works." "How's it work then?" "Honestly, I don't entirely know. But I know it's not your job to be perfect, so adults don't leave. Ivy brushed hair back from Maisie's forehead. You're 6. You're supposed to make messes and ask questions and sometimes say things that come out wrong. That's called being a kid. Mama used to say that. Tears welled in Maisie's eyes. Before she died, she was right. I miss her so much it hurts. Ivy's own eyes stung. I know, baby. I know. She sat with Maisie until the little girl cried herself into exhausted sleep, still clutching Ivy's hand like a lifeline. When Ivy finally pulled free and stood, her back ached and her knees protested. She was too heavy to sit on children's beds for long periods. Her body reminded her of that constantly. She made her way downstairs, intending to bank the fire before bed. Cole sat at the dining table, cleaning his rifle by lamplight. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his features. Thought you'd gone to bed. Maisie needed someone. Ivy began raking ashes over the fire's coals. She cried herself to sleep. Cole's hand stilled on the rifle. She say, why? Misses her mama. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush stone. Finally, Cole spoke, voice rough. She talk about that a lot? First time she mentioned it to me. But I suspect she thinks about it constantly. Don't know what I'm supposed to say when she brings it up. Ivy turned to face him. Maybe you don't have to say anything. Maybe she just needs to know it's all right to miss her. It's been 2 years. Grief doesn't care about calendars, Mr. Mercer. He flinched like she'd struck him, set down the cleaning rag slowly. It's Cole. You're living here, taking care of my daughter. Seems foolish to stand on formality. Cole, then. Ivy wiped her hands on her apron. And you can call me Ivy. Already was. Something that might have been humor touched his mouth. In my head. They looked at each other across the dimly lit room. The moment stretched, awkward and charged with something neither seemed ready to name. Cole cleared his throat. She really all right? She's a little girl who lost her mama and feels like she's losing her papa too, bit by bit. So, no, she's not all right. But she will be if we work at it. We? I'm here to help, not just with cooking. Cole's jaw worked. I hired you to cook and clean. Maisie's my responsibility. And she's lonely and scared and needs more than one person noticing she exists. Ivy kept her voice gentle but firm. I'm not trying to replace her mother, but I can be someone who cares, if you'll let me. For a moment she thought he'd refuse, thought the walls would slam down and he'd retreat into whatever fortress he'd built around his grief. Instead, he just nodded once, sharp and quick. Appreciate it. It wasn't permission exactly, but it was close enough. Ivy headed for the stairs, exhaustion pulling at her bones. At the doorway, she paused. Cole? Yeah? When's the last time you slept? He didn't answer, didn't need to. The shadows under his eyes told the whole story. You can't pour from an empty cup, Ivy said quietly. Eventually you'll collapse. Then where will Maisie be? Don't have time for sleeping. You don't have time not to. She left him there, surrounded by gun oil and lamplight, and whatever ghosts haunted him in the dark. Upstairs in her small room at the end of the hall, Ivy finally let herself feel the weight of the day. The narrow bed sagged when she sat on it. The mattress was thin, the blankets threadbare, but it was hers, a room of her own in a place that needed her. For the first time in months, maybe years, Ivy Calloway felt something close to hope. It was terrifying, because hope meant having something to lose, and she'd lost enough for one lifetime. Through the thin walls, she heard Cole moving downstairs, heard him bank the fire properly, check the door locks, climb the stairs with heavy steps. His bedroom door closed with a soft click. The house settled into silence. Ivy lay in the darkness, listening to wind rattle the windows and coyotes sing their lonely songs to the moon. Somewhere in this broken house, a 6-year-old girl slept with mended dolls and dried-out dreams. Somewhere else, a widowed cowboy pretended he didn't need sleep or help or hope. And in a cold room at the end of the hall, a woman who'd been mocked and dismissed her entire life wondered if she'd finally found the one place desperate enough to let her prove she was worth keeping. She fell asleep before finding an answer. The first week passed in a blur of work that never seemed to end. Ivy woke before dawn each morning to stoke the fire, heat water, start coffee. By the time pale light crept through the kitchen windows, She had biscuits in the oven and bacon sizzling in the cast iron skillet. Cole would appear like clockwork at 5:30, dressed for work, moving through the kitchen with the efficiency of someone who'd learned not to expect conversation. He'd eat standing up, gulp coffee that was still too hot, mutter something about checking fences or moving cattle, and disappear into the frozen landscape before Ivy could ask if he wanted seconds. Maisie was easier. The little girl began creeping downstairs earlier each morning, drawn by the smell of food and the novelty of someone actually wanting her company. She'd sit at the table swinging her legs, chattering about her dolls, or the mouse she'd seen in the barn, or the dream she'd had where her mama came back but looked different. Those last ones broke Ivy's heart clean in half. By the end of the first week, Ivy had established a routine. Breakfast at dawn, clean the kitchen, scrub floors, do laundry in the big copper tub out back, hauling water until her arms ached. Prepare lunch. Mend clothes, start supper, wash dishes, collapse into bed. She fell asleep each night before her head fully hit the pillow. The work was brutal, the isolation was worse, but somehow it felt right. On the 8th day, Ivy made her first real mistake. She'd been scrubbing the floor near the fireplace when she noticed the vase of dried flowers on the mantel. The same ones Maisie had mentioned, the ones her mother had picked. They'd been dead so long they'd turned brittle and gray, petals crumbling at the slightest touch. Ivy thought she was being helpful. She gathered them carefully, intending to throw them out and maybe replace them with something fresh when spring came. She'd just wrapped them in newspaper when Maisie walked in from outside. The little girl stopped dead. "What are you doing?" "Just clearing out some old—" "Those are Mama's flowers," Maisie's voice went shrill. "Put them back." "Honey, they're dead. They've been dead for—" "I don't care." Tears spilled down Maisie's cheeks. "They're hers. You can't throw them away." Ivy's stomach dropped. "Maisie, I'm sorry. I didn't realize—" But the little girl was already running up the stairs, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. Ivy stood in the middle of the kitchen holding dead flowers and feeling like the worst person alive. She was still standing there when Cole came in 20 minutes later, covered in snow and looking confused. "What happened? Maisie just about knocked me over running to her room." Ivy held up the newspaper bundle. "I threw out her mother's flowers. I didn't know they meant so much." Cole's face went carefully blank. "They've been there since the funeral." "I thought I was helping." "Yeah, well..." He took the bundle from her hands, unwrapped it carefully. The flowers crumbled further at his touch. Can't help some things. He carried them back to the mantel, arranged them in the vase with surprising gentleness. "Cole, I'm sorry. I should have asked first." "You didn't know?" His voice was tired. "Hard to ask about things nobody talks about." "Maybe that's part of the problem." He turned to look at her, something sharp in his gaze. "Meaning?" "Meaning Maisie's 6 years old and scared to mention her own mother because it makes you shut down. Meaning these flowers have been rotting here for 2 years because neither of you can stand to let go. Meaning—" "You've been here a week." Cole's voice went cold. "Don't presume to tell me how to handle my grief. I'm not talking about your grief. I'm talking about hers." They stared at each other across the kitchen. Outside, wind howled against the windows. Upstairs, Maisie's sobs had quieted to hiccups. Finally, Cole spoke. "She tell you that? That she's scared to talk about her mother?" "She didn't have to. I can see it." Cole's jaw worked. He looked older suddenly, the lines around his eyes deeper than they should have been on a man who couldn't be much past 35. "I don't know how to do this," he said quietly. "How to be enough for her. How to work this ranch and raise a daughter and not think about—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I'm failing at all of it." The admission cost him. Ivy could see it in the way his shoulders hunched, the way his hands clenched at his sides. "You're not failing. You're drowning." Ivy moved closer. "There's a difference." "Feels the same from where I'm standing." "I know, but you're not alone anymore. I'm here. Let me help." "You are helping. You cook. You clean." "I mean, with Maisie. With the hard parts." Cole looked at her like she'd offered him something he didn't know how to accept. "Why would you do that?" "Because she needs it. Because you need it. Because I—" Ivy stopped herself before saying too much. "Because I'm here, and I can." For a long moment, Cole didn't respond. Then he nodded once, sharp and quick. "I'll go talk to her." Want me to come? No, I need to. He rubbed his face. I need to do this part myself. Ivy watched him climb the stairs, each step heavy with dread and determination. She heard his knock on Maisie's door, heard the little girl's muffled voice, heard the door open and close. Then nothing. Ivy turned back to the supper she'd been preparing, but her hand shook slightly as she chopped carrots. She'd overstepped. She knew she had. A week in this house didn't give her the right to tell Cole Mercer how to parent his daughter. But watching that little girl break herself into pieces, trying to be whatever her father needed, was killing Ivy slowly. 30 minutes later, Cole came back downstairs. His eyes were red. He didn't say anything, just grabbed his coat and headed back outside. But when Maisie appeared a few minutes later for supper, her eyes were red too, and she climbed into Ivy's lap without asking, burying her face in Ivy's shoulder. Papa said Mama would have liked you, she whispered. Said you remind him of her, how she cared about things. Ivy's throat closed up. She held the little girl tighter. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. They sat like that until supper burned slightly and had to be salvaged. Neither of them minded. The second week brought Joe Henderson. Ivy had heard about the old ranch hand, but hadn't met him yet. He stayed in the bunkhouse, kept to himself, and apparently only came to the main house for meals when specifically invited. Which was never. Ivy decided to change that. She packed a lunch basket, fresh bread, cold roast beef, apple pie, and walked out to the bunkhouse after breakfast. The structure was even more run down than the main house, leaning slightly to one side like a drunk man. She knocked. No answer. Mr. Henderson? It's Ivy Calloway. I brought lunch. Still nothing. She was about to leave when the door cracked open. An old man peered out at her with one eye, the other obscured by a drooping eyelid that looked like it had been damaged years ago. He had maybe 5 teeth left, and a beard that could have housed a family of sparrows. Don't need charity, he growled. Good thing this isn't charity, it's payment. For what? Information. I'm new here. Want to know what this ranch was like before everything went to hell? Joe's visible eye narrowed. What makes you think it went to hell? The collapsed fences, the half-empty corrals, the fact that Cole Mercer looks like he hasn't slept in 2 years, and you're hiding in this bunkhouse like a hermit. Ivy held up the basket. So, you want pie or not? A long pause. Then the door opened wider. Joe's bunkhouse was surprisingly tidy. Narrow bed made military tight, few possessions neatly arranged, a small stove providing minimal heat. He'd been reading when she knocked. A battered copy of Mark Twain played open on the table. You read? Ivy asked, surprised. Did before my eye went bad. Joe sat down heavily, gesturing for her to do the same. Can still manage some, if the light's good. Ivy unpacked the lunch, setting out food between them. Joe stared at the spread like he hadn't seen this much food in months. He probably hadn't. Cole been feeding you? Ivy asked. When he remembers. Which ain't often. Joe took a bite of bread, closed his good eye in appreciation. Been making do. On what? Beans mostly. Some jerky I made last fall. Ivy's jaw tightened. That stops now. You come to the main house for meals, breakfast, lunch, and supper, every day. Don't need. I'm not asking, I'm telling. Ivy cut a large slice of pie. You work this ranch, you eat proper. That's how it works. Joe studied her with his good eye. You always this bossy? Only when people are being stupid about their own well-being. Something that might have been a smile twitched at the corner of Joe's mouth. He took the pie, ate a bite, and made a sound that was almost indecent. You make this? This morning. Tastes like heaven. Real butter? Would I use anything else? Joe ate 3 more bites before speaking again. You want to know about before? About when Sarah was alive? Sarah. That was Cole's wife's name. Ivy had been wondering, but nobody had mentioned it. If you're willing to share, Joe set down his fork, gaze going distant. This ranch was something back then. Not big by territory standards, but solid. Good cattle, good horses, fences that didn't fall down every winter. Cole and Sarah, they worked it together. She wasn't just some pretty thing sitting in the house. She could rope a calf, break a horse, shoot straight enough to drop a coyote at 50 yards. Ivy tried to picture it, tried to imagine this ranch alive and thriving. What happened? Baby happened. Maisie. Joe's expression softened. Sarah had a hard time with the birth, never quite recovered full strength. Then that winter she caught pneumonia, went from coughing to dying in less than a week. The brutality of it stole Ivy's breath. And Cole broke something inside him when she died. Not just grief, guilt. Thought he should have gotten the doctor sooner, should have taken her to town, should have done 1,000 things different. Joe shook his head. Man's been punishing himself ever since, working himself into the ground, like if he just tries hard enough, he can make up for what he thinks he failed at. That's not sustainable. No, it ain't. Joe met her gaze directly. Which is why you being here matters more than you probably realize. I'm just a cook. You're the first person in 2 years who's made Maisie laugh. The first person who's gotten Cole to eat regular meals. The first person who's treated this place like it could be a home again instead of a tomb. Joe leaned forward. So don't you go thinking you're just anything. You're a lifeline, whether you meant to be or not. The words settled over Ivy like a heavy blanket, warm but suffocating. What if I can't be what they need? Can't nobody be everything someone needs? But you can be something. Sometimes that's enough. They finished lunch in comfortable silence. When Ivy stood to leave, Joe stopped her. Miss Calloway? Ivy. Ivy. He nodded. Thank you. For the food. For caring enough to walk out here. See you at breakfast tomorrow, 5:30. Yes, ma'am. Ivy walked back to the main house with her empty basket, her mind churning. She'd come to this ranch expecting to cook and clean and stay out of the way. Instead, she was getting tangled up in grief and hope and a broken family that was trying to figure out how to be whole again. It was terrifying. It was also the most alive she'd felt in years. The third week brought a trip to town that changed everything. Cole announced it at breakfast, his voice flat. Need supplies. We're going to Blackstone Ridge day after tomorrow. Maisie's face lit up. Can I come? No, too cold. But, Papa, I said no, Maisie. The little girl's face crumpled, but she didn't argue further, just pushed her eggs around her plate with a fork. Ivy waited until Maisie had gone outside to play before speaking. She could come. I'd watch her. Don't need you to watch her. Need you to help load supplies. Fine, but she'd love to see town. Town doesn't need to see her. Cole's voice went hard. People talk. Say things they shouldn't. She don't need to hear it. Ivy understood then. He wasn't protecting Maisie from the cold. He was protecting her from gossip about her dead mother and struggling father. All right, but you tell her why. Don't just say no. Cole looked at her sharply. You always this opinionated about how I parent? Only when you're making it harder than it needs to be. They stared at each other across the kitchen table. Then Cole stood abruptly, grabbed his hat, and walked out without another word. Ivy sighed. This job was going to give her gray hair before she turned 30. 2 days later, she and Cole set out before dawn. The ride to Blackstone Ridge took 3 hours in the wagon. Cole drove in near silence, his jaw tight, eyes scanning the landscape like he expected trouble around every bend. Ivy tried to make conversation and failed. Weather's clearing. Grunt. Think we'll get more snow? Shrug. You always this chatty, or am I special? That got a look. Almost a glare, but with the faintest hint of humor underneath. Just thinking, he said finally. About? Whether I ordered enough feed last time. Whether the cattle will make it through another month. Whether... He stopped. Nothing important. Sounds pretty important to me. Cole was quiet for a long stretch. Then, ranch is failing. You probably already figured that out. I figured it's struggling. Failing seems harsh. Struggling, failing, same thing with different timelines. His hands tightened on the reins. Used to run 200 head of cattle. Now I'm down to 30. Can't afford to hire proper ranch hands. Can barely afford feed. If I don't turn things around by spring... He didn't finish. Didn't need to. What happens in spring? Ivy asked quietly. Banknote comes due. Either I pay it or they take the ranch. The words hung in the cold air between them. Ivy had suspected the money situation was bad. She hadn't realized it was catastrophic. How much do you owe? More than I've got. How much more? Cole looked at her. Why? You planning to produce a miracle? No, planning to understand what we're working with. We. He said it like the word was foreign. This isn't your problem. I live there. I care about Maisie. That makes it my problem, whether you like it or not. Ivy kept her voice steady. So, how much? $3,000. The number hit like a physical blow. $3,000 might as well have been $3 million. That was the kind of money ranchers saved for years to accumulate. The kind of money you got from selling entire herds, not 30 head of struggling cattle. That's impossible. Yeah. Cole's voice was hollow. Sarah's medical bills before she died, the funeral, 2 years of crop failures and cattle disease, and weather that killed half my herd. It adds up. What about selling land? Who's buying in this territory? Everyone's struggling same as me, and even if I found a buyer, I'd lose the best grazing ground. Wouldn't be enough ranch left to support what cattle remain. They rode in silence for another mile. There's got to be something, Ivy said. If there was, I'd have thought of it by now. But Ivy's mind was already working. She'd spent years managing a boarding house's finances, stretching pennies until they screamed. She knew how to make do with nothing. The question was whether ranch finances worked the same way. Blackstone Ridge appeared on the horizon like a judgment. The town was bigger than Ivy remembered from her last visit months ago. Or maybe it just felt bigger now that she was returning as someone's employee instead of someone's daughter. Cole guided the wagon down the main street. People stared. At first, Ivy thought they were staring at her. The fat woman who'd left town in disgrace, coming back in even worse circumstances. Then she realized they were staring at Cole. Fear, pity, curiosity, judgment. The legendary widower with the failing ranch and the motherless child. Cole's shoulders tensed, but his face stayed blank. He pulled up in front of the general store, set the brake, and climbed down without looking at anyone. We'll get supplies, load up, and leave, he said quietly. Don't need to make a day of it. They walked into the general store together. The place hadn't changed. Same wooden floors, same shelves packed with goods, same smell of coffee and tobacco and leather. But the proprietor's face shifted when he saw Cole. Mercer, didn't expect to see you this month. Need supplies, Harrison. Got a list. Cole handed over a piece of paper. The proprietor, Harrison, scanned it, his expression souring. This is a lot. You got credit to cover it? I'll pay cash. Cash. Harrison's eyebrows rose. Things looking up out at your place? Just get the order. Cole's voice went cold. While Harrison and his assistant gathered supplies, Ivy wandered the store. She was examining fabric when she heard the whispers start. 2 women in fine dresses stood near the ribbons, not bothering to keep their voices down. That's her, isn't it? The fat cook from Wichita. Poor thing, probably the only work she could get. Well, Mercer must be truly desperate, though I suppose beggars can't be choosers. Ivy's face burned. She'd heard it all before, every variation of mockery, every barely concealed insult. She should have been used to it by now. She wasn't. She turned to leave, to wait outside where their words couldn't reach her. But then she heard one of them say something that stopped her cold. He should marry Celeste Beaumont, solve all his problems at once. Does Celeste even want him anymore? After the way he rejected her last time? Want him? Darling, she owns half the territory now. She could buy his ranch outright and not notice the expense. If she wanted him, she'd have him. Then why hasn't she? Pride, probably. Though I heard she's been asking about him lately. Maybe she's reconsidering. Ivy stood frozen near the fabric, her stomach twisting. Who was Celeste Beaumont? Before she could process that question, Cole appeared at her elbow. Ready to go? His face was carefully blank, but his jaw was tight enough to crack teeth. He'd heard the women, too. They loaded the wagon in tense silence. Harrison helped carry out bags of flour, sugar, coffee, cornmeal. Cole paid in cash like he'd promised, counting out bills with steady hands. The money made a significant dent in what must have been his savings. Ivy's chest ached watching it disappear. They were about to leave when someone called out, "Cole Mercer, hold up a minute." A man approached, tall, well-dressed, with the kind of confidence that came from money and status. He had politician written all over him, from his pressed suit to his practiced smile. Cole's entire body tensed. Don't have time for chatting, Douglas. Just a quick word about your situation. What situation? Your ranch. The banknote. Douglas's smile sharpened. I've been authorized to make you an offer. Not interested. You haven't heard the offer yet. Don't need to? I'm not selling. Douglas glanced at Ivy, then back to Cole. Let's speak privately. Whatever you've got to say, you can say in front of Miss Calloway. The use of Miss instead of just her first name sent a small thrill through Ivy, despite everything. Douglas sighed. Fine. The Beaumont Cattle Syndicate is prepared to offer you fair market value for your land. They'd even let you stay on as a ranch hand if you wanted. Generous terms, considering your current circumstances. Beaumont Syndicate. Cole's voice went dangerously quiet. So, Celeste sent you. Miss Beaumont is a businesswoman. She sees an opportunity. She sees a chance to steal land I've bled for. Cole's hands clenched. Tell her the answer's the same as it was 2 years ago. No. Cole, be reasonable. I said no. Cole climbed onto the wagon, took the reins. Ivy, let's go. Ivy scrambled up beside him, her heart pounding. As they pulled away, she heard Douglas call out, Offer stands until spring, Mercer. Don't be too proud to take it when you're drowning. Cole didn't respond, just drove the wagon out of town with his jaw locked and his eyes straight ahead. They were 2 miles outside Blackstone Ridge when Ivy finally spoke. Who's Celeste Beaumont? Cole's hands tightened on the reins. Nobody important. That man made her sound pretty important. Silence. Cole, she's a rancher, wealthy, owns property all over the territory. His voice was clipped. After Sarah died, she made it clear she'd be interested in combining our operations, through marriage. The words hit Ivy like ice water. She proposed to you? More or less. What did you say? I said no. Told her I wasn't interested in marrying for business reasons. Cole's jaw worked. She didn't take it well, started buying up land around mine instead. Figured she'd either starve me out or wait until I was desperate enough to change my mind. And now you're desperate. Now I'm desperate. He said it like an admission of defeat. But I still won't sell to her. Won't give her the satisfaction. Ivy processed this new information. A wealthy rancher circling like a vulture, waiting for Cole to fail. Willing to marry him just to acquire his land. What's she like? Ivy asked. Beautiful, smart, ruthless. Cole's voice was flat. Everything a successful rancher needs to be in this territory. Sounds like you admire her. I respect her business sense. Doesn't mean I want to marry her. They rode in silence for another mile. Then Ivy asked the question that had been burning in her mind since the store. Those women. They said you should marry her, solve all your problems. Cole looked at her sharply. You believe that? I believe it would solve your financial problems. And create a dozen others. Like what? Cole was quiet for so long Ivy thought he wouldn't answer. Then, like spending the rest of my life with someone who sees me as a business opportunity instead of a person. Like Maisie growing up with a stepmother who'd resent every minute she spent raising another woman's child. Like waking up every day in a house that stopped being a home and became a transaction. The bitterness in his voice was sharp enough to draw blood. I'd rather lose the ranch than live like that, he finished. Ivy's chest ached. What if there was another way? There isn't. You don't know that. Ivy. Cole finally looked at her. I appreciate the optimism, but I've been fighting this for 2 years. I've tried everything. There's no miracle coming. Maybe not, but there might be hard work and smart planning. I've been working hard my whole life. Where's it gotten me? Here, still fighting. Ivy met his gaze. That counts for something. Cole looked at her like he wanted to believe her, like some part of him was desperate for hope, but too beaten down to reach for it. You don't know what you're talking about, he said finally, but the words lacked conviction. They didn't speak again until they reached the ranch. Maisie ran out to meet them, her face bright with excitement. Did you bring me anything? Cole's expression softened immediately. Might have found some peppermint sticks. Maisie squealed and launched herself at her father. Cole caught her easily, swinging her up in his arms like she weighed nothing. For a moment watching them, Ivy saw what this family could have been, should have been. Then the moment passed and reality crashed back in. $3,000 by spring. A vulture circling, a ranch falling apart. Ivy helped unload supplies, her mind working furiously. There had to be something they could do. Some way to earn money, cut expenses, find a path forward. That night after Maisie was in bed, Ivy found Cole at the dining table, going over account books by lamplight. She set down a cup of coffee beside him. "Can I see?" He looked up, surprised. "See what?" "The books. The accounts. Whatever you're torturing yourself with. This isn't your concern. We already had this conversation. I live here. It's my concern." Ivy pulled out a chair. "Besides, I managed a boarding house for 10 years. I know my way around finances." Cole studied her for a long moment. Then he slid the ledger across the table. Ivy spent an hour going through the numbers. It was worse than she'd thought. Income had dropped by 70% in 2 years. Expenses had actually increased. The gap between what the ranch earned and what it owed was growing wider every month. No wonder Cole looked like he hadn't slept in 2 years. "What'd you spend this on?" Ivy pointed to a large expense from 14 months ago. "New bull. Needed to improve the breeding stock." "And this?" "Hired help for spring roundup." "You spent $600 on hired help?" "Couldn't do it alone. Thought if I could get the cattle to market, I'd make it back." "Did you?" Cole's silence was answer enough. Ivy kept reading. Medical expenses, funeral costs, feed, equipment, every penny spent with good intentions and desperate hope. "All right," she said finally. "Here's what I see. You've been spending money trying to save the ranch. That's what you do when a ranch is dying. No, that's what you do when you're grieving and trying to fix something that can't be fixed by throwing money at it." Ivy looked at him steadily. "The ranch doesn't need a new bull or hired hands. It needs time to recover. And you need to stop bleeding money. I've cut expenses to the bone already." "Have you?" Ivy flipped through pages. "You're buying feed instead of grazing what land you have. You're paying for equipment repairs instead of learning to do them yourself. I know how to repair equipment. I don't have time to do everything." "Then we make time. We prioritize." Ivy grabbed a blank piece of paper. "Starting tomorrow, we go through this ranch top to bottom. Figure out what actually needs fixing versus what can wait. What we can do ourselves versus what requires cash. What can earn money versus what's just sentimental." Cole stared at her. "You're serious? You've got 4 months until that note comes due. We can either spend those 4 months waiting to fail or fighting like hell to survive." "We." There was that word again, said with the same confusion as before. "Yes, we. You, me, Joe, even Maisie can help with small things." Ivy met his gaze. "Unless you'd rather I mind my own business and just cook your meals." For a long moment, Cole didn't respond. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. "All right, we'll try it your way." It wasn't hope exactly, but it was close enough to make Ivy's heart race. They started the next morning before the sun cleared the horizon. Ivy stood in the barn with Cole and Joe, her breath making clouds in the freezing air. She'd brought coffee and biscuits, which the men accepted gratefully before Cole spread out a rough map of the ranch on a hay bale. "This is what we're working with," he said, tracing boundaries with a calloused finger. 200 acres total. The north section has the best grazing, but half the fences are down. East section is where most of the cattle are now. South is too rocky for much except maybe goats. West section has the creek, but it floods every spring. Ivy studied the map. "What about the buildings? Main house, barn, bunkhouse, old smokehouse that's falling apart, chicken coop that barely stands." Cole's jaw tightened. "Used to have a proper stable, but I sold the good horses 2 years back. Couldn't afford to feed them." "What are you riding now?" "2 workhorses. Old and slow, but they get the job done." Joe spat tobacco juice into the hay. "Barely. That mare's got maybe 1 more season in her." The assessment was grim but necessary. Ivy pulled out the paper she'd brought, started making notes. "All right, let's prioritize. What absolutely has to be fixed before spring?" Cole and Joe exchanged glances. "North fence," Joe said. "If we don't get it up before the thaw, cattle will wander onto Beaumont land. She'll claim them as hers, and we won't see them again." "How much fence are we talking?" "Maybe 2 miles worth." Ivy's pencil paused. "Can we do that ourselves?" "Wire and post cost money," Cole said, "even if we do the labor." "How much money?" $100, give or take." It might as well have been 1,000. Ivy chewed her lip, thinking. What if we used materials we already have? Anything we could repurpose. Joe's good eye lit up. Old corral out back, been falling down for years. Posts are still good, just need repositioning. That'll work for maybe a quarter mile, Cole said. Still need to buy the rest. Then we do the quarter mile first. Secure the most vulnerable section, buy time to figure out the rest. Ivy made a note. What else? They went through the list systematically. Barn roof needed patching before the next heavy snow. Chicken coop required reinforcement. The well pump was making concerning noises. The smokehouse was beyond saving and should be torn down for salvage lumber. Every item represented work. Every solution required either money or creativity they weren't sure they possessed. By the time the sun was fully up, Ivy had 3 pages of notes and a headache forming behind her eyes. This is a lot, she admitted. Told you. Cole's voice was flat. Been drowning for 2 years. List just keeps getting longer. Maybe, but now there's 3 of us looking at it instead of 1. Ivy folded the papers carefully. We start today. North fence first. Joe, you and Cole handle the physical labor. I'll manage everything else. Everything else? Cole raised an eyebrow. House, meals, Maisie, figuring out how to stretch every penny until it screams. Ivy met his gaze. That's my part. You focus on yours. Something shifted in Cole's expression. Not quite hope, but maybe the absence of hopelessness. All right, he said. Let's get to work. The next 2 weeks were the hardest physical labor Ivy had ever experienced. She woke at 4 each morning to start breakfast. By 5, Cole and Joe were eating quickly before heading out to work on fences. Maisie would stumble downstairs around 6, still rubbing sleep from her eyes, and Ivy would have her fed and dressed before beginning the day's real work. Laundry, mending, cleaning, inventory, meal planning, but also new things. Ivy started going through the ranch's storage areas systematically, cataloging everything. She found tools that had been forgotten, lumber that could be repurposed, an old butter churn that just needed new paddles, 3 wagon wheels in various states of disrepair that together might make 2 functional ones. She found ledgers from before Sarah died, when the ranch was thriving, studied them like scripture, looking for patterns, understanding what had worked and what hadn't. She found, in a trunk in the attic, a packet of letters tied with ribbon, love letters between Cole and Sarah. Ivy almost didn't read them. It felt like trespassing on something sacred. But she needed to understand what this ranch had been, what this family had lost. The letters were beautiful. Sarah's handwriting was neat and confident. She wrote about the ranch like it was a living thing she loved, about her hopes for Maisie, about how much she cherished Cole, even when he was being stubborn or difficult. One letter in particular made Ivy's throat close up. My darling Cole, you work yourself too hard. I know you think you need to be strong enough for both of us, but that's not how marriage works. Let me carry some of the weight. Let me help you. We're partners, remember? That means we fight together, not you fighting alone while I watch. I love you. Come to bed. The ranch will still be here tomorrow. Sarah. Ivy sat in the dusty attic with tears running down her face, mourning a woman she'd never met. No wonder Cole was killing himself with work. He'd been doing exactly what Sarah had begged him not to do, carrying everything alone. She tied the letters back carefully, placed them exactly where she'd found them. Then she went downstairs and made supper with shaking hands. That night, after Maisie was asleep, Ivy found Cole in the barn. He was working by lantern light, repairing a broken harness with methodical precision. You're going to ruin your eyes working in this light, she said. He didn't look up. Need it done by tomorrow. It'll keep until morning. Can't afford delays. Ivy watched him work for a moment. His hands were raw from fence work, knuckles bleeding in places. His shoulders hunched with exhaustion. Cole? When's the last time you took a break? Don't need breaks, need to fix this ranch. You can't fix anything if you work yourself to death. His hand stilled on the leather. What do you want from me, Ivy? The question was tired, not angry, like he genuinely didn't understand what she was asking. I want you to come inside, eat the supper I kept warm, maybe sit by the fire for 10 minutes before you collapse. Ivy kept her voice gentle. I want you to remember you're human. Being human is expensive. Can't afford it right now. Can't afford not to. She moved closer. Maisie asked me today why you don't smile anymore. That got his attention. Cole looked up, pain flashing across his face. What'd you tell her? That you're worried about the ranch, that worry makes it hard to smile. Ivy paused. She asked if she was part of what you're worried about, if she makes things harder. No. The word came out sharp and immediate. She's the only good thing left. Then show her that. Spend 10 minutes with her before bed. Let her see your face when it's not carrying the weight of everything. Cole set down the harness slowly. You think I'm failing her. I think you're so busy trying to save her future that you're missing her present. The words hung between them in the lantern-lit barn. Outside, wind rattled the walls. A horse shifted in its stall. Finally, Cole stood. All right, 10 minutes. It's a start. They walked back to the house together, their boots crunching through snow. Ivy could feel the exhaustion radiating off him like heat. Inside, she served him the supper she'd kept warm. Roast chicken, potatoes, carrots glazed with honey. Cole ate like a starving man, which he probably was. When was the last time he'd eaten a full meal? Afterward, he climbed the stairs to Maisie's room. Ivy heard their voices, his low and rumbling, hers high and excited. Heard Maisie laugh at something he said. Heard the creak of bed springs as he sat on her bed. 20 minutes later, he came back down. His face looked softer somehow, younger. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For reminding me what matters. Then he headed to his own room, leaving Ivy alone with dishes and a heart that was doing dangerous things in her chest. The third week brought the first real crisis. Ivy was in the kitchen making bread when Joe burst through the door, his face pale beneath the beard. Miss Ivy, we got trouble. She was already reaching for her shawl. What kind? Cattle. 3 of them broke through the east fence last night. Cole's tracking them now, but... Joe hesitated. They wandered onto Beaumont land. Ivy's stomach dropped. How far onto her land? Mile, maybe more. And her ranch hands already found them. This was bad. This was exactly the kind of thing they couldn't afford. Where's Cole now? Riding out to talk to her foreman. Asked me to come back and let you know he might be late. He went alone? Wouldn't let me come. Said he'd handle it. Joe's good eye narrowed. But I don't like it. Beaumont's people play rough. Ivy made a decision. Stay with Maisie. I'm going after him. Miss Ivy, you don't know the territory. Then you better give me directions fast. Joe did, though he clearly thought she was making a mistake. Ivy saddled the older mare, ignoring the horse's skeptical look, and rode out following Joe's instructions. The Beaumont ranch appeared on the horizon like something from a different world. Where Cole's place was struggling and broken down, this ranch gleamed with prosperity. New fences stretched for miles. A massive barn sat fresh-painted in the center of a compound that included multiple outbuildings, corrals full of cattle, and a ranch house that looked more like a mansion. This was what money could buy in cattle country. This was what Cole was competing against. Ivy found him near the main corral, facing down a man who could only be Beaumont's foreman. The 3 missing cattle stood nearby, looking unconcerned about the drama they'd caused. Don't care about your fence problems, the foreman was saying. These cattle are on Beaumont land. That makes them Beaumont cattle. They're wearing my brand. Cole's voice was dangerously calm. Check them yourself. Brand could have been altered. You calling me a cattle thief? The foreman smiled. I'm saying Miss Beaumont has a generous offer standing. Maybe you should take it before things get complicated. Things are already complicated. Give me my cattle. Can't do that without Miss Beaumont's permission, and she ain't here. Ivy dismounted, her legs shaky from the ride. Both men turned to look at her. Cole's face went through several emotions: surprise, concern, anger. Ivy, what are you doing here? Making sure you don't do anything stupid. She turned to the foreman. Where's Miss Beaumont? In town on business? Then I suggest you send someone to fetch her, because we're not leaving without our cattle, and I suspect she'd prefer to handle this conversation personally rather than through hired muscle. The foreman's eyes narrowed. And who are you? I'm the woman telling you this is about to become a legal matter unless Miss Beaumont gets involved. Cattle theft is serious business. I'm sure the sheriff would be interested in hearing how Beaumont Ranch is claiming livestock with another man's brand. It was a bluff. Ivy had no idea if the sheriff would care, but the foreman's expression suggested he wasn't eager to find out. Wait here. He stalked off toward the main house. Cole rounded on Ivy the moment he was gone. What the hell are you thinking, riding out here alone? Stopping you from getting killed or arrested. I can handle this. Can you? Because from where I'm standing, you were about 10 seconds from hitting that man. Cole's jaw worked. He called me a thief. He was baiting you, and you were taking the bait like a hungry fish. Ivy kept her voice low. You think Beaumont wants a fair negotiation? She wants you desperate and angry so you make mistakes. I'm not making mistakes. You rode out here alone to confront her people on her land. That's either brave or stupid, and I'm leaning towards stupid. They glared at each other. Then Cole's shoulders sagged slightly. I just want my cattle back. I know. We'll get them. Ivy touched his arm briefly. But we're doing this smart. 20 minutes later, a carriage arrived. Celeste Beaumont stepped out like she was descending from a throne. She was everything Ivy had feared and worse. Beautiful in the way wealthy women were, perfectly dressed, perfectly coiffed, perfectly composed. She wore a riding outfit that probably cost more than Ivy made in a year, and she wore it like armor. Her eyes swept over Cole with proprietary interest, then landed on Ivy with something colder. Cole Mercer. What a surprise. Celeste's voice was smooth as silk and twice as expensive. I heard you were having cattle troubles. Your foreman is claiming my cattle based on trespassing. Are they your cattle? The brands look suspicious. The brands are clear as day. You want to lie about it. At least make it convincing. Celeste's smile sharpened. Careful, Cole. You're on my land making accusations. I'm on your land retrieving my property. Property you can't afford to feed properly. Property that keeps wandering onto my ranch because your fences are falling apart. She stepped closer. This is getting tiresome. My offer still stands. Sell me the ranch, take a fair price, and stop this slow death you're living. Not interested. Even now? With winter barely half over and your resources running out? Celeste's gaze flicked to Ivy. Even with new mouths to feed? The implication was clear. Ivy was a burden, another expense Cole couldn't afford. Ivy lifted her chin. The cattle, Miss Beaumont. Can we discuss the actual issue? Celeste looked at her properly for the first time. The assessment was quick and brutal, taking in Ivy's worn dress, her oversized shawl, her rough hands, her body, finding her wanting in every category. And you are? Ivy Calloway. I work at Mercer Ranch. Work? How interesting. Celeste turned back to Cole. Reduced to hiring charity cases now? Cole's entire body tensed. Careful. Why? It's true, isn't it? That's the fat cook from Blackstone Ridge, the one whose father drank himself to death, the one nobody wanted. Celeste's voice dripped false sympathy. How desperate you must be. The words hit like physical blows. Ivy felt her face burn, her chest tighten. She'd heard it all before. Every insult, every mockery. But hearing it here, in front of Cole, delivered by this perfect woman who represented everything Ivy wasn't, it hurt worse than usual. Cole moved faster than Ivy had ever seen him move. He stepped between them, his face carved from stone. Say one more word about her, he said quietly, and I will make you regret it. Celeste actually stepped back, surprise flickering across her features. Cole, the cattle. Now. Or I ride into town and file a formal complaint with the sheriff about theft and harassment. You can't prove. I've got 3 cattle with my brand on Beaumont land, witnesses to your foreman's threats, and a written record of your repeated attempts to force me into selling. Cole's voice could have frozen fire. Want to see how that plays in court? For the first time, uncertainty crossed Celeste's face. She wasn't used to Cole fighting back. Wasn't used to him having leverage. Fine, she gestured sharply to her foreman. Give him the cattle. Miss Beaumont, I said give them to him. The foreman obeyed reluctantly, herding the 3 cattle toward Cole. Celeste turned back to Cole, her expression calculating now instead of cruel. This doesn't change anything. You're still drowning. Come spring, you'll lose everything. Maybe, but I'll lose it on my terms, not yours. And what about her? Celeste's gaze moved to Ivy. What happens to your charity case when the bank takes the ranch? Where does she go then? That's not your concern. No? Celeste smiled coldly. I'm just trying to understand your priorities. You're choosing pride over practicality, stubbornness over security, a dying ranch and a... She paused delicately. Unremarkable cook over stability and partnership with someone who could actually help you. She does help me, more than you ever could. The words were simple, matter of fact, but they hit Ivy like lightning. Celeste's face went tight with anger. You'll regret this. Already got plenty of regrets. What's one more? Cole gathered the cattle, gestured for Ivy to mount up. They left Beaumont Ranch with Celeste watching from her perfect lawn, her expression promising vengeance. They drove the cattle in silence for the first mile. Then Ivy spoke, her voice shaking slightly. You didn't have to defend me like that. Yes, I did. She was right about some of it. I am Charity. You can't really afford— Stop! Cole's voice was sharp. Don't you dare finish that sentence. Cole, you want to know what you are? You're the reason Maisie smiles again. You're the reason I ate a hot meal every day this week. You're the reason I'm even fighting instead of just waiting to fail. He looked at her directly. You're not Charity. You're the best decision I've made in 2 years. Ivy's throat closed up completely. She couldn't speak, could barely breathe. They rode the rest of the way home in silence that felt different than before. Warmer. Charged with something neither was ready to name. When they reached Mercer Ranch, Joe came running out. Thank the Lord. Thought you two were dead. Just reclaiming property. Cole dismounted, started herding the cattle toward the corral. Get that east fence reinforced today. Can't risk this happening again. Already on it. Joe looked between them. Everything all right? Fine. Cole's voice was clipped. Just had a conversation with Beaumont. That bad? Worse, but we got our cattle back. Joe whistled low. Must have been some conversation. Cole didn't elaborate. Just threw himself into work with renewed intensity. But later after supper, after Maisie was asleep, Ivy found him at the kitchen table again. This time he wasn't looking at ledgers, just sitting in the dark, staring at nothing. Can't sleep? She asked, thinking. About? About what Celeste said. About whether she's right. He looked up, his face haggard in the lamplight. Maybe I am being stubborn. Maybe selling would be the smart choice. Would it make you happy? Happiness is expensive. That's not an answer. Cole was quiet for a long time. Sarah loved this ranch. We built it together. Selling it feels like erasing her. Or maybe holding on to it is what's keeping you stuck in the past. You think I should sell? I think you should decide what you're actually fighting for. If it's the ranch because Sarah loved it, that's one thing. If it's the ranch because you love it and want Maisie to grow up here, that's different. Ivy sat down across from him. But if you're just holding on because you're afraid of what letting go means, that's not fighting. That's drowning with extra steps. Cole looked at her like she'd punched him in the chest. I don't know how to let go. Then don't. Not yet. We've got until spring. Let's use every day of it. Ivy reached across the table, took his hand before she could think better of it. But you're not doing this alone anymore. Understand? His fingers closed around hers, rough and warm and trembling slightly. Why are you helping me? The question was raw, vulnerable. You could leave any time, find easier work somewhere else. Why stay? Because Maisie needs me. Because this place feels more like home than anywhere I've ever been. Because when you look at me, you don't see someone who's too fat to matter. You see someone worth defending. Because I want to, Ivy said instead. That enough? Cole stared at their joined hands. Yeah, that's enough. They sat like that for a long time, the house quiet around them, the fire burning low. Outside, coyotes sang to the frozen stars. Inside, two broken people held on to each other like lifelines and pretended they weren't terrified of what came next. Winter deepened, and the work never stopped. February brought storms that buried the ranch under 3 feet of snow in a single night. Ivy woke to find drifts blocking the doors, ice coating the windows, and Cole already outside digging paths to the barn. She watched him from the kitchen window, his breath coming in white clouds, his shoulders bent against wind that wanted to break him. She put coffee on and started breakfast, her hands moving automatically while her mind worked on problems that seemed to multiply daily. The feed situation was getting desperate. They'd stretched supplies as far as possible, but the cattle were showing ribs. Joe had suggested slaughtering 2 of the weakest steers for meat and to reduce mouths to feed. Cole had agreed with a look on his face like he was signing death warrants. That was 3 days ago. The meat now hung in the smokehouse, and they were down to 28 head of cattle. Each loss felt like failure carved into frozen ground. Maisie appeared in the kitchen doorway, shivering in her nightgown. "It's cold," she announced. "Then come here." Ivy opened her arms. The little girl climbed into her lap without hesitation now. It had taken weeks to earn that trust, and Ivy guarded it carefully. She wrapped a blanket around them both and held Maisie close while the coffee percolated. "Is Papa still mad?" Maisie asked quietly. "Your Papa's not mad, honey. He's worried." "Seems the same." "I know. But worry comes from caring. Being mad comes from not caring enough." Ivy stroked the child's tangled hair. "He cares a lot about you, about the ranch. Sometimes caring feels heavy." Maisie was quiet for a moment. "Mama used to say Papa carried the world on his shoulders, like that man in the story, the one holding up the sky." Atlas. Sarah had told her daughter about Atlas. "Your mama was smart," Ivy said. "She was everything." Maisie's voice went small. "I'm starting to forget her face sometimes. Just pieces. Then I feel bad for forgetting." Ivy's chest ached. She remembered that feeling from when her own mother died, the guilt of losing details, the panic of watching memories fade. "You know what helps?" Ivy asked. "Telling stories about her, keeping her alive in words even when the picture gets fuzzy." "Like what kind of stories?" "Any kind. Happy ones, sad ones, boring ones. Tell me something your mama did that made you laugh." Maisie thought hard. "She used to sing when she cooked, real loud and real bad. Papa would cover his ears and pretend to be dying, and Mama would sing even louder just to torture him." Ivy smiled. "That sounds perfect." It was. Maisie's eyes filled with tears. "I miss her singing, even the bad parts." "Of course you do." "Do you think Papa misses it too?" "I know he does." "Then why doesn't he ever talk about her?" That was the question, wasn't it? The one Ivy had been circling for weeks without finding an answer that made sense. "Maybe it hurts too much," Ivy said carefully. "Maybe he's afraid if he starts talking about her, he won't be able to stop. Or maybe he thinks talking about her will make you sadder." "I'm already sad. Not talking about her just makes me lonely sad instead of missing sad." The distinction was so precise it broke Ivy's heart. "Have you told your Papa that?" Maisie shook her head. "He gets that look, like he's going to break if I push too hard. He's tougher than he looks." "Are you?" The question caught Ivy off guard. "Am I what?" "Tough. Tougher than you look." Maisie twisted in her lap to study Ivy's face. "'Cause you look soft, but you do hard things. Like when you yelled at that mean foreman, or when you stay up late helping Papa with numbers even though you're tired." Ivy didn't know what to say. Nobody had ever called her tough before. Fat, yes. Unremarkable, certainly. But tough? "I'm just doing what needs doing," she said finally. "That's what tough means, silly." Maisie settled back against her. "Doing hard stuff even when you're scared." Before Ivy could respond, the kitchen door banged open. Cole stumbled in, covered head to toe in snow, his face red from cold. "Barn roof's sagging worse," he said without preamble. "Need to clear the snow before it collapses." "Can it wait until after breakfast?" Ivy asked. "No, another storm's coming tonight. If that roof goes, we lose the livestock." He was already turning back toward the door when Ivy spoke. "Cole, stop." He paused, surprise flickering across his features. Ivy realized she'd never directly ordered him to do anything before. "You've been out there for 2 hours already. You're half frozen. Sit down, drink something hot, eat something solid, then go back out." She stood, setting Maisie gently aside. 5 minutes won't make a difference to that roof, but it might make a difference to whether you collapse from exhaustion. Cole looked like he wanted to argue. Then he saw Maisie watching him with worried eyes, and something in him softened. 5 minutes, he agreed. Ivy poured coffee, served leftover biscuits with butter and honey. Cole ate standing up at first, then finally sat when Maisie climbed into the chair next to him and started chattering about the icicles outside her window. Watching them together, Ivy felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. This wasn't her family. This wasn't her life. She was hired help who'd gotten too comfortable, too invested. Come spring, when the bank took the ranch or Cole found some miracle solution, she'd move on to the next job. That was how it worked. Except it didn't feel temporary anymore. It felt like putting down roots in frozen ground and hoping they'd somehow survive the thaw. After breakfast, Ivy bundled up and followed Cole to the barn. "You don't need to help," he said. "This is rough work. I've got arms and a shovel. That's all you need, isn't it?" Joe was already on the barn roof, scraping snow with methodical precision. He waved when he saw them approach. "Got the south side cleared. North side's the trouble." The north side of the barn roof had a bow in it that made Ivy's stomach clench. The weight of snow was literally bending the structure. Another foot of accumulation and the whole thing would cave in. Cole grabbed a ladder, started climbing. Ivy followed before he could stop her. "Ivy, you don't have to. We doing this or arguing about it?" He looked at her for a beat, then nodded. "Stay on the reinforced sections. Step where I step." The roof was terrifying. Wind whipped across the exposed surface, threatening to knock Ivy off balance. The snow was knee-deep in places, heavy and wet, and the view of the ground from up here made her head spin. But she shoveled anyway. They worked for hours, clearing snow in methodical strips. The physical labor was brutal. Ivy's arms burned, her back screamed, her lungs ached from breathing frozen air. But there was something satisfying about it, too. About seeing progress. About working beside Cole and Joe, all three of them fighting the same enemy. They were taking a water break when Joe spoke. "Got a question for you, Miss Ivy." "Just Ivy." "Ivy, then. You planning to stay on after winter?" The question made both Ivy and Cole go still. "Haven't thought that far ahead," Ivy said carefully. "Should probably start thinking. Spring comes fast out here. Things will change quick once the thaw hits." Joe's good eye studied her. "Cole's gonna need all the help he can get." "Joe." Cole's voice held warning. "What? I'm just saying, woman works this hard, does this much. She deserves to know whether there's a future here or if she's wasting her time." "That's not—" "It's fine," Ivy interrupted. "Joe's right. I should know what I'm working toward." Cole's jaw worked. "There might not be a ranch to work on come spring. Banknotes due in 2 months. Unless I produce a miracle, then we better start working on miracles." Ivy kept her voice steady, even though her heart was pounding. "What have we got for assets? Things we could sell without destroying the ranch?" "Nothing worth $3,000. "What about things worth smaller amounts that add up?" Cole exchanged glances with Joe. "The old equipment in the back shed," Joe said slowly. "Some of it's good quality. Might fetch $50, $60 if we found the right buyer." "That's a start. What else?" "Sarah's jewelry." Cole's voice went tight. "Might be worth a few hundred." "No." The word came out sharper than Ivy intended. "That's Maisie's inheritance. We're not touching it. It's just things. It's her mother's things. Different category." Ivy thought hard. "What about cattle futures? Could we promise delivery of calves in the fall at today's prices?" "Who's buying futures from a ranch that might not exist in 3 months?" "Someone looking for a deal. Someone willing to gamble." Ivy's mind was racing now. What if we offered a partnership? Someone invests capital now, gets a percentage of profits for the next 5 years. That's debt with extra steps. No, that's leverage. Debt assumes we're drowning. Partnership assumes we're building something worth investing in. Cole stared at her. "You really think someone would go for that?" "Won't know until we ask, but it's better than giving up or selling Sarah's jewelry." Joe whistled low. "Woman's got a point." "Woman's got a fantasy," Cole muttered. But there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Something that looked almost like hope. They finished clearing the roof just as the next storm rolled in. That night, another blizzard buried the ranch. Wind howled like something alive and angry, battering the house until the walls shook. Snow fell so thick Ivy couldn't see the barn from the kitchen window. They were trapped inside for 3 days. The forced proximity changed things. With nowhere to go and nothing to do except wait out the storm, the careful distance they'd all maintained started to crack. Maisie grew restless and wild, running through the house shrieking. Cole retreated into account books, his face growing darker by the hour. Joe stayed in the bunkhouse, preferring isolation to cabin fever. Ivy tried to keep everyone fed and sane. On the second day, she organized games to keep Maisie occupied. They played cards, told stories, made paper dolls from old newspapers. Cole watched from the table, pretending to work but clearly listening when Ivy told Maisie about her childhood in Wichita. "Your papa really gambled the whole boarding house away?" Maisie asked, eyes wide. "Every penny. Told himself he'd win it back. Never did. Ivy kept her voice light even though the memory stung. That's why gambling's dangerous. Makes people believe in luck instead of work. What happened after you lost the house? Packed up everything I owned, got in a wagon, and came here. Were you scared? Terrified. But you came anyway? Didn't have much choice. Sometimes brave and desperate look the same from the outside. Maisie considered this seriously. I think you're brave. I think you're kind for saying so. From the table, Cole made a sound that might have been agreement. On the third day, the storm broke. Ivy woke to silence so complete it was unsettling. No wind, no rattling walls, just crystalline quiet. She went downstairs to find Cole already dressed for outside work, loading his rifle. Going somewhere? She asked. Checking livestock. Storm like that, we could have lost animals. Want company? He looked at her, clearly weighing whether to say yes. It's cold, deep snow, might find dead cattle. Sounds like you could use help. Something passed across his face. Yeah, all right. They set out into a world transformed by snow. Everything was white and pristine and deadly beautiful. The sun glinted off ice crystals like scattered diamonds. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe. The barn was intact, thank God. The cattle huddled inside looked thin but alive. Ivy counted heads while Cole checked for injuries. 28, she called out. All accounted for. Small miracles, Cole muttered. They moved on to check the outer pastures, following fence lines to look for breaks or downed sections. The snow was waist-deep in places, making every step exhausting. They were half a mile from the house when Ivy's foot went through a snow-covered hole. She went down hard, pain exploding through her ankle. Couldn't stop the cry that escaped. Cole was at her side instantly. What happened? Stepped wrong. Think I twisted something. Ivy tried to stand, gasped when her ankle refused to take weight. Damn it. Can you walk? No. Cole didn't hesitate. He scooped her up like she weighed nothing, started carrying her back toward the ranch. Cole, put me down. I'm too heavy. You're fine. I'm not fine. I'm going to break your back. Ivy. His voice was firm. Stop arguing and let me help you. She stopped arguing, partly because her ankle hurt too much, partly because being carried by Cole Mercer was doing strange things to her ability to think clearly. He was strong. She'd known that intellectually, but feeling it was different. His arms solid beneath her, his chest steady, his breathing barely labored despite carrying her full weight through deep snow. I really am too heavy for this, she said quietly. Says who? Says everyone who's ever looked at me. Cole's arms tightened slightly. Everyone's wrong. They didn't speak again until they reached the house. Cole carried her straight to the kitchen, settled her in a chair, and knelt to examine her ankle with surprising gentleness. His hands were rough but careful, probing the swollen joint. Don't think it's broken, probably just a bad sprain. He looked up at her. You need to stay off it for a few days. Can't. Too much work. Joe and I can handle the outside work. You focus on healing. Cole, that's not a request. His eyes were serious. You work harder than anyone on this ranch. You're allowed to take a break when you're hurt. The concern in his voice made Ivy's throat tight. All right. A few days. He nodded, stood. I'll get some snow to ice it down. While he was outside, Maisie appeared. What happened? Twisted my ankle. I'm fine. Papa carried you? Yes. Maisie's face split into a grin. Like a princess. Hardly. More like a sack of potatoes. Did you like it? The question was too knowing for a 6-year-old. Ivy felt her face heat. It was practical, that's all. Uh-huh. Maisie's grin got wider. That's why you're all red. I'm red because my ankle hurts. If you say so. The little girl skipped off, humming suspiciously cheerful songs. Over the next few days, Ivy discovered that being injured on a ranch was its own special kind of torture. She had to sit still while Cole and Joe did the work she normally handled, had to accept help getting around, had to let Maisie bring her things instead of fetching them herself. It made her feel useless. Worse, it gave her too much time to think about how comfortable she'd gotten here, about how Maisie called her Ivy Mama when she thought no one was listening, about how Cole looked at her sometimes like she was something precious instead of something to be tolerated, about how much it was going to hurt when this all fell apart, because it would fall apart. Things like this always did. On the 4th day of her convalescence, Cole brought her the account books. Thought you might want something to do that doesn't involve standing. She took them gratefully, spread them across the kitchen table. Her ankle was propped on a chair. Wrapped in bandages, Cole had applied himself with hands that shook slightly. "Looking for anything specific?" she asked. "Miracles. Patterns. Anything I missed?" He sat across from her, exhausted. "We're running out of time." Ivy went through the numbers methodically. Income, expenses, debts, assets. The story they told was grim, but not hopeless. "What if you borrowed against future cattle sales?" she asked. "Who's lending to a failing ranch?" "Someone who wants to get in on the ground floor of a recovery." Ivy tapped the ledger. "You've got good breeding stock left. The cattle you have are quality, even if there aren't many. That's worth something." "Not $3,000 worth." "No, but combined with selling equipment, cutting expenses further, maybe taking on a limited partner." She did quick calculations. "We might get close." Cole's expression was carefully neutral. "And if we don't get close enough? Then at least we tried everything before giving up." "You keep saying we, like this is your fight too." "Isn't it?" Ivy met his gaze directly. "I live here. I care about what happens. That makes it my fight whether you want it to be or not." Cole stared at her for a long moment. Then he said something that changed everything. "Why do you care so much?" The question was simple. The answer was anything but. "Because I've never had a place that felt like home before. Because Maisie looks at me like I matter. Because you defended me to Celeste Beaumont like I was worth defending. Because for the first time in my entire life, I feel like I belong somewhere. Because you gave me a chance when nobody else would," Ivy said instead. "Seems fair to return the favor." It wasn't the whole truth, but it was true enough. Cole's expression shifted into something Ivy couldn't read. "You know, the bank could still take everything. That all this work might be for nothing. Might be. But sitting here doing nothing guarantees we lose. Fighting at least gives us a chance." "You sound like Sarah. She used to say stuff like that. That trying was worth something even if it failed." It was the first time Cole had mentioned his wife's name in Ivy's presence. The weight of it settled over the kitchen like snow. "She sounds like she was smart," Ivy said carefully. "She was. About most things." Cole's gaze went distant. "She'd probably tell me I'm being an idiot right now, trying to save a ranch that's already dead instead of accepting reality and moving on. Or she'd tell you to fight like hell because this ranch is Maisie's inheritance and your shared dream." "How do you know what she'd say?" "Because I found her letters, because I read her words and understood her heart, because I know what it's like to love something so much you'd do anything to protect it." "I don't know. Just guessing." Ivy looked down at the ledgers. "But either way, you get to decide what happens next. Not the bank, not Celeste Beaumont. You." Cole was quiet for a long time. Then he stood, moved around the table, and did something completely unexpected. He kissed the top of Ivy's head, quick and almost chaste, but deliberate. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for giving a damn when you didn't have to." Then he walked out, leaving Ivy sitting frozen at the table with her heart doing acrobatics in her chest. Maisie appeared in the doorway approximately 3 seconds later, grinning like a cat who'd gotten into cream. "Told you he liked you." Ivy's face burned. "You were spying?" "I was observing. Big difference." The little girl climbed into the chair Cole had vacated. "So when are you going to marry him?" "Maisie." "What? You like him. He likes you. That's how it works." "That's not... We're not... It's complicated." "Doesn't seem complicated. Seems simple." Maisie counted on her fingers. "You cook good food. You make him smile. You saved me from the mean ladies in town by giving Papa someone nice to talk to. You fixed the chicken coop and helped with fences, and you smell like cinnamon. What's complicated about that?" Ivy didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Honey, your Papa's got a lot on his mind right now. Romance isn't... Mama used to say Papa worked better when someone reminded him he was human and not just a work machine." Maisie's voice went soft. "I think you remind him." The observation was too accurate, too knowing. "Your mama sounds like she knew your Papa very well." "She did, and I think she'd like you." Maisie leaned forward conspiratorially. Want to know a secret? What secret? What? Sometimes I pretend you're my new mama. Not to replace mama, just to have someone who cares like a mama does. The little girl's eyes shimmered. Is that bad? Ivy's vision blurred with tears. No, baby, that's not bad at all. So you don't mind? I'm honored. Maisie threw her arms around Ivy's neck, squeezing tight. Ivy held her, this fierce little girl who'd chosen her for reasons Ivy still didn't fully understand. When Maisie finally pulled back, her face was serious. You have to stay. Even if the bank takes the ranch. Even if we have to move somewhere else. You have to promise you'll stay with us. Ivy's heart cracked. Maisie, promise. How could she promise that? How could she guarantee anything when the future was a frozen wasteland full of unknowns? But looking at Maisie's desperate face, Ivy found herself saying, I promise I'll try my hardest to stay, all right? It wasn't a real promise, but Maisie accepted it like gospel truth. Okay, that's good enough. The little girl skipped off, leaving Ivy alone with account books and a heart that was doing its best to betray her by falling for people she had no business loving. Outside, the sun was setting. Another day survived. Another day closer to spring and whatever judgment it would bring. Ivy looked down at the ledgers, at the numbers that didn't quite add up to salvation. Then she grabbed a fresh piece of paper and started making lists, plans, options, desperate measures worth attempting. If they were going down, they'd go down fighting, and maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way to survive after all. March arrived with false promises of spring. The snow began melting during the day, turning the ranch into a sea of mud, then freezing again at night into treacherous ice. It was the worst kind of weather. Everything half thawed, half frozen, fully miserable. And the banknote was due in 6 weeks. Ivy had spent every spare moment over the past month working on her plan. She'd cataloged every asset on the ranch, researched cattle prices in 3 territories, and written letters to potential investors she'd found mentioned in old newspapers at the general store. None of them had written back. The equipment sale had brought in $43. Better than nothing, worse than needed. They were still over $2,000 short with time running out like water through cupped hands. Ivy was in the kitchen making bread when Cole came in looking like death warmed over. His face was gray, his hands shaking slightly as he poured coffee. You sick? She asked. No, just tired. You look worse than tired. You look like you're about to collapse. I'm fine. Cole, I said I'm fine. His voice came out sharper than intended. He immediately looked apologetic. Sorry, didn't mean to snap. What's wrong? He slumped into a chair, scrubbing his hands over his face. Got a letter from the bank yesterday. They're sending someone out next week to assess the property, getting ready for foreclosure proceedings. The words hit Ivy like a physical blow. Already? We still have 6 weeks. They want to be prepared. Make sure the numbers match what's owed. Cole's laugh was bitter. Like I'd lie about being broke. Ivy's mind raced. What if we had a miracle before they showed up? What if we could prove the ranch is worth saving? With what miracle? We've tried everything. Not everything. Ivy wiped flour from her hands, pulled out the chair across from him. I've been thinking, what if we approach this differently? We've approached it every way possible. Not this way. Ivy took a breath. What if we asked the town for help? Cole stared at her like she'd suggested flying to the moon. Ask the town? The same town that's been watching me fail for 2 years? That gossips about every mistake I make? The same town where you've lived your whole life, where people knew Sarah, where you've done business with the same families for years. Ivy kept her voice steady. You think you're alone in this, but you're not. You've helped people. Sarah helped people. That goodwill counts for something. It doesn't count for $2,000. Maybe not all at once, but 50 people giving $40 each, that's $2,000. Ivy leaned forward. It's worth asking. No. Cole's voice was flat. I'm not begging. It's not begging. It's asking for help from a community that knows you. They know I'm failing. Why would they throw money at a sinking ship? Because sometimes people surprise you. Because sometimes folks want to help but don't know how. Because Ivy hesitated, then pushed forward. Because you're too proud to see that asking for help isn't weakness. It's just being human. Cole's jaw worked. I can't. Then let me. What? Let me ask. I'll go into town, talk to people. You stay here and work the ranch. Ivy met his gaze steadily. You don't have to beg, but I'm willing to if it means saving this place. Ivy, they'll tear you apart. You think the women who gossiped about you before will suddenly be kind? Probably not, but I've survived unkindness before. I'll survive it again. She reached across the table, took his hand. Let me try. What's the worst that happens? They humiliate you and we still lose the ranch. Then we're no worse off than we are now. Cole looked at their joined hands, his expression tortured. Why would you do this? Put yourself through that for a ranch that isn't even yours? Because it feels like mine. Because Maisie feels like mine. Because you feel like mine even though I have no right to claim any of it. Because I'm invested now, Ivy said instead, and I don't quit on things I'm invested in. Cole stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, reluctantly, he nodded. All right. But if it gets too bad, if they're too cruel, you come back. Deal? Deal. 2 days later, Ivy rode into Blackstone Ridge with a sick feeling in her stomach. She dressed in her best outfit, which wasn't saying much. The navy dress was clean and mended, her hair was pinned neatly, and she'd worn her mother's cameo brooch for courage. But she still looked like what she was, a heavy-set woman who'd never quite fit anywhere, about to ask for mercy from people who'd mocked her most of her life. The general store was her first stop. Harrison looked up when she walked in, surprise flickering across his face. Miss Calloway, didn't expect to see you. Need to talk to you about something. Business matter. His eyebrows rose. All right, what kind of business? Ivy had rehearsed this speech 100 times. It still came out nervous and uncertain. You know Cole Mercer's ranch is struggling. Banknotes due in 6 weeks. If he can't pay, he loses everything. She took a breath. I'm asking for help. From folks who knew him and Sarah, who've done business with the ranch over the years. Even small amounts would help. $20, $40, whatever people can spare. Harrison's expression went carefully neutral. You asking for charity? I'm asking for investment in a good man who's had bad luck. Cole's a hard worker. The ranch has good land. With time and help, it could recover. Or it could fail anyway and folks lose their money. That's possible, but doing nothing guarantees it fails. Ivy kept her voice steady. Sarah Mercer used to shop here, didn't she? Used to bring Maisie in for peppermint sticks? Something shifted in Harrison's face. She did. Good woman. Died too young. Her daughter's 6 years old and about to lose the only home she's ever known, the ranch her parents built together. Ivy met his gaze directly. I know it's a risk, but some things are worth risking for. Harrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. Sarah once floated me credit when I was short on cash for inventory. Said she trusted I'd pay her back when I could. He pulled out his cash box, counted out bills. $50. Tell Cole it's paid forward from a debt I owed his wife. Ivy's eyes stung with tears. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You got a long road ahead convincing the rest of this town. He was right. Over the next 6 hours, Ivy visited every business in Blackstone Ridge. The bank, the saloon, the blacksmith, the dress shop where Martha worked, the doctor's office, the feed store. Some people gave generously. The blacksmith contributed $30, saying Cole had helped him fix a broken wagon wheel during a blizzard years ago. The doctor gave $20, remembering how Sarah had helped deliver babies when he was overwhelmed. But others were cruel. One ranch wife looked Ivy up and down and laughed. You think we're giving money to save Cole Mercer's failing ranch? So he can keep employing charity cases like you? Another man sneered openly. Why should we throw good money after bad? Mercer made his choices. Let him face the consequences. A woman at the dry goods store whispered loudly to her companion. Pathetic. Fat women always think they can buy affection with other people's money. Each insult landed like a blow. Each rejection made Ivy want to give up, go back to the ranch, admit she'd failed. But she thought about Maisie asking her to stay, about Cole carrying her through the snow, about the way this broken family had somehow become her family, even though she had no claim to them. So she kept going. By late afternoon, she'd collected $340, not nearly enough, but more than she dared hope for. She was about to head back when she saw Celeste Beaumont's carriage outside the hotel. Ivy's first instinct was to avoid her. But then a reckless thought occurred. What if Celeste could be convinced to help? It was insane. The woman had made it clear she wanted Cole's ranch for herself. Why would she contribute to saving it? But Ivy was desperate, and desperate people did foolish things. She walked into the hotel before she could talk herself out of it. Celeste sat in the restaurant drinking tea like she owned the place, which she probably did. Her gaze sharpened when she saw Ivy approach. Miss Calloway, what an unexpected surprise. Miss Beaumont, can I speak with you? About? Cole Mercer's ranch. Celeste's smile was a knife wrapped in silk. Come to beg on his behalf? How touching. Ivy sat down without being invited. I'm asking you to invest in saving the ranch instead of waiting to buy it from the bank. Why on earth would I do that? Because you're a businesswoman who recognizes opportunity. The ranch has good land, good cattle genetics, good water access. With proper management, it's worth more as a working operation than as parceled out property. Perhaps. But why would I want Cole Mercer to succeed? He rejected me, humiliated me in front of this entire town. He turned down a marriage proposal. That's not humiliation, that's incompatibility. Ivy kept her voice level. You're smart enough to know the difference. Celeste's eyes narrowed. You're bolder than you look. I'm desperate. Desperation makes people bold. Or stupid. Celeste sipped her tea delicately. What exactly are you proposing? Invest in the ranch. Not as charity, as business. You get a percentage of future profits, guaranteed return on investment over 5 years. And you get to prove you're not just a vulture circling failures, but a savvy investor who sees potential. How much are you asking for? Ivy's palms were sweating. $2,000. Celeste actually laughed. You have nerve, I'll give you that. Is that a no? It's a question of why I should trust a failing rancher and his fat cook to generate profits worth my investment. The insult stung less than it should have. Ivy was getting used to being underestimated. Because Cole Mercer is the hardest working man in this territory. Because the only reason his ranch failed was grief and bad luck, not incompetence. Because with proper support, he'll succeed out of pure stubbornness, if nothing else. Ivy leaned forward. And because I'll personally guarantee the ranch runs efficiently. I'll manage the finances, the planning, everything that doesn't require being on horseback. That's my contribution to this partnership. Celeste studied her with calculating eyes. You really believe in him, don't you? Yes. Why? Because he's worth believing in. Or because you're in love with him. Ivy's breath caught. She couldn't deny it, couldn't confirm it. The truth was too raw, too new. My reasons don't change the business opportunity, she said carefully. Celeste was quiet for a long time. Then she set down her teacup with deliberate precision. I'll give you $1,000. Not as investment, as a loan. 5% interest paid back over 10 years. If the ranch fails, I get the land at assessed value. If it succeeds, I get my money back with interest, and Cole Mercer has to publicly acknowledge that I helped save his ranch. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Deal, Ivy said before she could overthink it. You should discuss it with Cole first. I'm discussing it with you now. If he has problems with the terms, we'll renegotiate. Ivy held out her hand. Do we have an agreement? Celeste looked at the offered hand with something like respect. We have an agreement. She shook Ivy's hand firmly. Though I suspect you're going to regret this when Cole finds out what you promised. Probably. But we'll deal with that when it happens. Celeste wrote out a bank draft for $1,000 right there in the hotel restaurant. Ivy tucked it into her bag with shaking hands, still not quite believing it was real. One more thing, Celeste said as Ivy stood to leave. I don't like you. I think you're foolish and naive and completely unsuited for frontier life. Noted, but I respect what you just did. Walking into enemy territory, asking for help even though you knew I'd be cruel, that takes courage. Celeste's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. Sarah Mercer would have done the same thing. Maybe Cole didn't choose as poorly as I thought. The compliment was backhanded and grudging, but coming from Celeste Beaumont, it felt like a victory. Ivy rode back to the ranch with $1,340 in her bag and a heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. It still wasn't enough. They were $660 short, but it was closer than they'd ever been before. Cole was in the barn when she arrived. He looked up, hope and dread warring on his face. How bad was it? Ivy climbed down from the horse, every muscle aching. Mixed. Some people were generous. Others were exactly as cruel as you predicted. How much? $1,340. Cole's eyes widened. What? Harrison gave 50. The blacksmith gave 30. The doctor, the feed store, a few ranch families. Ivy pulled out the bank draft. And Celeste Beaumont gave 1,000. Cole stared at the draft like it was a snake. Celeste gave us money? Technically a loan. 5% interest over 10 years. If we fail, she gets the land. If we succeed, we pay her back and you have to publicly acknowledge she helped. You made a deal with her without asking me first? Yes, because we needed the money, and I knew you'd refuse. Ivy met his gaze steadily. You can be mad at me later. Right now, we need to figure out how to find $660 more. Cole opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Then he did something completely unexpected. He laughed. It started as a chuckle, then grew into full-bodied laughter that echoed through the barn. He laughed until tears ran down his face, until he had to lean against a post for support. You made a deal with Celeste Beaumont, he gasped between laughs. The woman who wants to destroy me. You walked right into her den and negotiated. I was desperate. You were magnificent. He wiped his eyes, still grinning. Sarah would have loved you. The words hit Ivy square in the chest. Cole. He crossed the barn in 3 strides, pulled her into his arms, and kissed her. Not on the forehead this time. Not chaste or careful. On the mouth. Like a man who'd been holding back for months and finally couldn't anymore. Ivy froze for half a second. Then she kissed him back with everything she'd been feeling but couldn't say. All the fear and hope and desperate affection she'd been carrying alone. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. I'm still mad you made a deal without asking. I know. But I'm also grateful beyond words. I know. And I think I'm falling in love with you. Ivy's heart stopped. You think? No, I know. I'm just terrified to say it because everything I love gets taken away. I'm not going anywhere. You can't promise that. I can promise I'll fight like hell to stay. Ivy pulled back enough to look at him properly. We're still 600 short. We're still fighting an uphill battle. But we're fighting it together now. That counts for something. Cole cupped her face with calloused hands. It counts for everything. They were interrupted by Maisie's delighted shriek from the barn doorway. I knew it! I knew you loved each other! The little girl launched herself at them, wrapping her arms around both their legs. Does this mean Ivy's staying forever? Does this mean you're getting married? Does this mean I get a mama again? Cole looked at Ivy, a question in his eyes. Ivy looked at Maisie, at this fierce little girl who'd decided they were family before anyone else had the courage to say it. One thing at a time, Ivy said gently. First we save the ranch, then we figure out everything else. But you promise you're staying. I promise I'm staying. Maisie squeezed tighter. Good, because I'm not letting you leave even if you tried. That night, Ivy sat at the kitchen table going through the numbers again. $1,340 collected. $660 still needed. She'd listed every remaining asset, every possible source of income, every desperate measure they hadn't tried yet. They could sell more equipment, but they needed most of it to work the ranch. Could slaughter more cattle, but that defeated the purpose of saving the herd. Could take another loan, but who would lend to them? She was staring at the ledger in frustration when Joe walked in. Heard you performed a miracle in town today, he said. Performed a desperate Hail Mary. Jury's still out on whether it's a miracle. Joe poured himself coffee, sat down across from her. Still short? $660 short. Joe was quiet for a moment. Got something that might help. Been meaning to tell Cole, but the timing never seemed right. Ivy looked up. What? Before my eye went bad, I was a carpenter, a good one. Made decent money building houses in Kansas City. Joe's visible eye went distant. Put away savings over the years. Figured I'd retire somewhere warm eventually. Joe, got about $800 in a bank in Kansas City. Been sitting there for years. Don't need it. No family to leave it to. May as well use it for something worthwhile. Ivy's throat closed up. Joe, we can't take your savings. Not asking, offering. This ranch gave me a place when I had nowhere else to go. Cole didn't turn me away when I was old and half blind and mostly useless. Seems like a fair trade. You're not useless. Don't matter what I am. Matters what I'm choosing to do with what I got. Joe leaned forward. Let me help, Miss Ivy. Let me be part of saving this place. Tears spilled down Ivy's cheeks. Are you sure? Sure as I've ever been about anything. We might still fail. You could lose everything. Could, but probably won't. Not with you managing the finances and Cole working the land and me doing whatever needs doing. Joe smiled with his few remaining teeth. We're a good team. Seems worth betting on. Ivy stood up, walked around the table, and hugged him fiercely. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. Oh. Joe patted her back awkwardly. All right, all right. Don't get all emotional on me. Just money. Can't take it with me when I die anyway. But it wasn't just money. It was faith. It was trust. It was an old man believing in a future he might not live to see. When Cole came in 20 minutes later, Ivy told him. His face went through several emotions. Shock, protest, gratitude, shame. I can't take an old man's retirement, he said. Already done, Joe called from the other room. Sent a telegram to Kansas City this afternoon. Money will be here in a week. Cole looked at Ivy helplessly. We can't. We can, and we will, and we'll pay him back with interest. Ivy pulled out her ledger, showed him the new numbers. With Joe's $800, we have $2,140. That's more than enough for the banknote, with some left over for spring expenses. Cole stared at the numbers like they were written in a foreign language. We're going to make it, he said, wonder in his voice. We're actually going to make it. Maybe, if nothing else goes wrong. Why do you have to say things like that? Because I'm realistic and mildly superstitious. Ivy smiled despite herself. But yes, barring disasters, we're going to make it. Cole pulled her into his arms, held her so tight she could barely breathe. I don't know how to thank you, any of you, for believing when I'd stopped believing. Thank us by making this ranch succeed, by proving everyone wrong, by showing Maisie that her parents' dream didn't die with her mother. I can do that. Cole's voice was muffled against her hair. With you here, I can do that. Of course, disaster struck anyway, because the universe had a cruel sense of timing. 3 days before the bank assessment, a late winter storm rolled through with vindictive fury. Not as bad as the blizzards they'd survived earlier, but bad enough. The cattle panicked in the wind and broke through the east fence again. Half the herd scattered across open territory in the darkness. By the time Cole and Joe realized what happened, the animals were gone into the night. Cole rode out immediately, despite the weather. Ivy watched from the window, her stomach churning with dread. He came back 8 hours later, half frozen and devastated. Lost 6 head, can't find them anywhere. Either dead in a ravine somewhere or wandered so far they're gone for good. 6 cattle. At current market value, that was almost $400. They were suddenly short again. Ivy did the math with shaking hands. Even with the collected funds, losing 6 head meant they'd barely scrape by with the banknote. There'd be nothing left for spring expenses, no cushion for emergencies, one bad break, and they'd be back where they started. Cole sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. It's over, he said dully. We were so close, and it's over. It's not over. We can't run a ranch with no reserves. The bank assessor is going to see we're operating on fumes. They'll declare us a bad risk and foreclose anyway. We'll figure something out. There's nothing left to figure out, Cole's voice cracked. I've lost. Sarah's ranch is gone. Maisie's inheritance is gone. Everything we fought for is gone. Ivy had never seen him this broken. Even at his lowest points, there'd been fight in him. Now there was just defeat. She knelt in front of him, took his hands. Listen to me. We have not lost. Not yet. We still have 2 days before the assessment. 2 days to produce a miracle. 2 days to try. That's more than we had a month ago. Ivy squeezed his hands. You taught me that trying matters even when success isn't guaranteed. Don't give up now. I'm so tired, Ivy. So tired of fighting. I know. But you don't have to fight alone anymore. She stood, pulled him up with her. We'll find those cattle. We'll recover what we can. And whatever happens with the assessment, we face it together. Cole looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. What did I do to deserve you? Hired me when nobody else would, defended me when you didn't have to, kissed me like I mattered. Ivy managed a smile. Pretty low bar, honestly. That got a weak laugh out of him. They spent the next 2 days searching for the lost cattle. Joe, Ivy, and Cole rode out in expanding circles, checking every draw and hollow within 5 miles of the ranch. Maisie stayed home under protest, watching from the windows. They found 3 of the missing cattle on the first day, huddled in a ravine. Alive, but weak from exposure. The other 3 stayed lost. The night before the bank assessment, they admitted defeat. Cole sat with the updated numbers, his face gray. We're short $300. Even if the assessor is generous, we don't have enough cushion to prove viability. Then we sell something else, Ivy said. We've sold everything that's sellable. Not everything, Ivy took a breath. What about the breeding bull? You said he's quality stock. He must be worth something. Cole's face went white. That bull is the only reason we can rebuild the herd. Selling him means giving up on the future. Keeping him means losing the present. Which matters more? It was a brutal choice, exactly the kind that made frontier life so unforgiving. Cole stared at the ledger for a long time. Then he nodded once, sharp and final. All right, I'll ride to town first thing tomorrow, see if anyone's buying. That night, none of them slept well. The bank assessor arrived at 10 in the morning. He was a thin man with spectacles and a pinched expression that suggested he found the entire world distasteful. His name was Mr. Whitmore, and he made it clear from the start that he wasn't there to be friendly. I'm here to verify assets, review accounts, and determine whether this property represents adequate collateral for the outstanding debt. He looked around the ranch with obvious disdain. Let's get started. Cole showed him everything. The cattle, the buildings, the equipment. Ivy had spent the morning making the house spotless, the books organized, everything presentable. It didn't seem to help. Whitmore made notes with a sour expression, asking pointed questions that felt designed to expose weakness. Why is your herd so small? Weather losses, disease, economic pressures. Why haven't you maintained the outbuildings? Focused resources on essential operations? Why do your account books show irregular income? Cattle prices fluctuate, that's standard. Whitmore made more notes, his face unreadable. After 2 hours of inspection, he sat down at the kitchen table to review his assessment. Cole, Ivy, and Joe waited in tense silence. Finally, Whitmore spoke. Your operation shows signs of significant financial stress. The property value, while decent, barely covers the outstanding debt when you factor in necessary repairs and operational costs. Your herd size is insufficient for sustainable income. Your reserves are minimal. Cole's hands clenched on the table. However, Whitmore continued, I see evidence of recent improvements, fence repairs, organized accounts, evidence of community support. He glanced at Ivy. Someone's been managing this property more carefully than previous records indicate. That would be me, Ivy said quietly. Whitmore studied her. You're the cook? And financial manager, apparently. He made another note. The bank's primary concern is risk mitigation. If I recommend foreclosure, we acquire land we don't particularly want and can't easily sell in this market. If I recommend extended terms, we risk further losses if the operation continues failing. So which is it? Cole's voice was tight. I'm recommending a conditional extension. You pay the full amount owed today. In exchange, the bank offers new terms on any future loans, lower interest, longer repayment period. But any default results in immediate foreclosure with no additional chances. It was better than outright foreclosure. Barely. We can pay today, Cole said. I'm selling my breeding bull this afternoon. That'll cover the shortfall. Whitmore's eyebrows rose. You're selling your breeding stock? That seems short-sighted. It's necessary. I see. Whitmore closed his ledger. I'll file my report recommending the extension, but Mr. Mercer, I strongly suggest you find more sustainable solutions going forward. This ranch is surviving, not thriving. There's a difference. After he left, they sat in stunned silence. We did it, Joe said finally. We actually did it. We survived, Cole corrected. For now. Surviving's better than the alternative. Ivy stood. Come on, you need to get to town before the buyers leave for the day. Cole rode out within the hour, leading the breeding bull behind his horse. Ivy watched him go with a heavy heart. That bull represented hope for rebuilding. Selling it felt like cutting off a limb to save the body. But at least the body survived. Cole returned 3 hours later with $500 and empty eyes. Got a good price, he said mechanically. Buyer from 2 territories over, needed quality genetics. He handed the money to Ivy without meeting her gaze. That night, Ivy found him in the barn, staring at the empty stall where the bull used to live. She didn't say anything, just stood next to him in the darkness. Finally, Cole spoke. Sarah and I picked out that bull together 3 years ago, before she got sick. She said he'd be the foundation for rebuilding. His voice cracked. I just sold the last piece of the dream we built. No. Ivy turned to face him. You sold one piece to save the rest. That's not giving up. That's adapting. Feels like giving up. I know. But it's not. Ivy took his hand. Tomorrow we pay off the bank. We start fresh with no debt hanging over us. We figure out how to rebuild without that bull, and we do it together. Cole looked at her, tears tracking through the dust on his face. I couldn't have done this without you. Any of it. You know that, right? We couldn't have done it without each other. That's the point. He pulled her into his arms, held her like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting. They stood like that for a long time, in a drafty barn on a half-saved ranch, holding each other against the darkness. The next day, Cole rode into town and paid off the banknote in full. $3,000 counted out in bills and coins from a dozen different sources. The bank manager counted it twice, made Cole sign a dozen documents, and finally stamped the note paid in full in red ink that looked like a victory flag. Cole rode home with that stamped note in his pocket and something like hope in his chest. When he got back to the ranch, Maisie ran out screaming with joy. We get to stay? We really get to stay? We really get to stay. Cole scooped her up, spun her around. Ranch is ours, free and clear. Ivy watched from the porch, her heart so full it hurt. That evening, they celebrated with a dinner that was half prayer, half Thanksgiving. Joe brought out a bottle of whiskey he'd been saving for years. Ivy made apple pie from their dwindling stores. Maisie chattered nonstop about all the things they'd do now that they weren't losing the ranch. It was the first genuinely happy meal Ivy had eaten since arriving. After Maisie went to bed, Cole found Ivy on the porch, watching stars emerge in the clear spring sky. Cold out here, he said. Worth it for the view. He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. I talked to the bank manager today. About future plans. Cole's voice was careful. Told him we're expanding operations, getting more cattle, improving infrastructure. We are? We will be, eventually. He paused. Also told him I'm getting married. Ivy's heart stopped. You're what? Cole turned to face her, nervous and hopeful all at once. I know we haven't talked about it officially. I know I'm probably doing this all wrong, but Ivy... He took her hand. You saved my ranch. You saved my daughter. You saved me. And I don't want to spend another day pretending you're just the cook. Cole, I love you. I'm in love with you. And I know I'm a mess of a man with a struggling ranch and a daughter who comes with trauma and a dead wife I'll never completely stop missing. But if you'll have me anyway, I swear I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. Ivy's vision blurred with tears. You already deserve me. That's not the question. Then what is? Whether you understand that I'm also a mess? I'm bossy and stubborn, and I'll probably spend our entire marriage telling you you're doing things wrong. Ivy squeezed his hand. I'm also going to gain weight as I get older, and my body's going to get worse, and people are always going to whisper about why you chose me. Let them whisper. I don't care what they think. I care because it hurts, and it'll keep hurting, and you need to know that before you make promises. Cole cupped her face with both hands. Ivy Calloway, I have survived grief, poverty, failure, and the worst weather this territory could throw at me. You think I can't survive some gossip from people whose opinions don't matter? His voice was fierce. You're the strongest person I know, the kindest, the smartest, and you're beautiful in ways that have nothing to do with what you look like and everything to do with who you are. So marry me, please. Make this broken ranch into a home again. Ivy couldn't speak past the lump in her throat, so she just nodded. Cole kissed her with something like reverence. When they finally pulled apart, both laughing and crying, Maisie's voice came from the doorway. "Finally, I've been waiting forever for you to ask her." They turned to find the little girl in her nightgown, grinning triumphantly. "You're supposed to be asleep," Cole said without any real authority. "Too excited! You're getting married!" Maisie launched herself at them. "Does this mean Ivy's my mama now?" Ivy looked at Cole, uncertain. He looked back at her, the question clear in his eyes. Ivy thought about Sarah, about the woman whose letters she'd read, whose garden she'd admired, whose family she'd helped rebuild. This wasn't about replacing her. It was about honoring what she'd started by continuing to love the people she'd left behind. "If you want me to be," Ivy said to Maisie, "I'd be honored." Maisie squeezed them both so hard they could barely breathe. "Best day ever," she whispered. They sat on the porch together, the three of them wrapped in blankets against the cold, watching stars wheel overhead. Tomorrow they'd start rebuilding in earnest. Tomorrow there'd be work and worry and 100 challenges they hadn't anticipated. But tonight, they were just a family. Broken pieces fitted together into something new and fragile and worth protecting. 3 months later, Ivy and Cole were married in the ranch house with half of Blackstone Ridge in attendance. Celeste Beaumont came, wearing an expression that was equal parts respect and resignation. She even wished them well, though she couldn't resist adding, "Don't make me regret that loan." Joe gave Ivy away, tears streaming from his good eye. Maisie served as flower girl, scattering dried petals from Sarah's garden that Ivy had carefully preserved. It wasn't a fancy wedding. The food was simple, the decorations minimal, the ceremony short, but it was real in a way that mattered more than elegance. After the guests left and Maisie finally fell asleep, Cole and Ivy sat on their porch watching the sun set over land that was finally, truly theirs. "You know what Sarah used to say?" Cole asked quietly. "What?" "That home isn't a place. It's the people who make you feel like you belong." He pulled Ivy closer. "I spent 2 years thinking I'd lost home when she died. Turns out I was wrong. Home just looked different than I expected." Ivy rested her head on his shoulder. "She sounds like she was very wise." "She was. And I think she'd be happy. Knowing Maisie has someone who loves her. Knowing the ranch survived. Knowing I found someone stubborn enough to not give up on us." "You think she'd approve of me?" "I think she'd say I'm lucky you were desperate enough to take the job." Cole kissed the top of Ivy's head. "And she'd be right." They sat in comfortable silence as stars emerged. Down in the valley, the ranch spread out before them. The cattle grazed peacefully. The barn stood strong with its newly repaired roof. Fences marched across the land in straight, solid lines. It wasn't perfect. The herd was still small. Money was still tight. There were seasons of struggle ahead, hard winters to survive, challenges they couldn't predict. But they'd face them together. And that made all the difference. Because the truth Ivy had learned over these brutal, beautiful months was simple. Strength had never been about perfection. It had never been about looking right or fitting in or meeting other people's expectations. Strength was getting up every morning and trying again. It was asking for help when you needed it. It was defending people who couldn't defend themselves. It was choosing to believe in something even when belief seemed foolish. It was loving imperfectly, but completely. It was being human. And humanity, Ivy had discovered, was more than enough. Years later, travelers passing through Red Mesa territory would tell stories about Mercer Ranch, about the big cowboy who'd rebuilt from nothing and turned his struggling operation into one of the most successful in 3 territories, about the woman who'd arrived with nothing and proved that courage came in all sizes, about the little girl who grew up strong and fierce, who eventually took over the ranch and ran it better than anyone expected. They'd talk about the spring flowers that bloomed outside the ranch house every year, planted in memory of the first Sarah and tended by the second. They'd mention the old ranch hand who lived to be 90, who told stories about the winter they'd almost lost everything and how 3 broken people had saved each other. But mostly, they'd talk about love. The stubborn, imperfect, relentless kind that refused to quit even when everything said it should. The kind that proved over and over that being underestimated was just another word for opportunity. The kind that turned a dying ranch in the middle of nowhere into something that mattered, into a home.